to conduct our work within their territory. So with that, I'll call to order the regular council meeting of July 20th, 2020. And let's start off with an approval of the agenda, please. Can I get someone to approve the agenda?
Approve.
Yeah.
I think it was moved by Carolina, seconded by Rob. All in favor? No, there's no discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Oh, wait, you got your hand up, Lisa?
I had it up to vote. To approve.
Okay. All right. So we're all in favor, none opposed, motion carries. Thank you. The adoption of the minutes. Can I get someone to move the item?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Carolina, seconded by Bruce. Seeing no hands, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
None opposed, motion carried. We have no delegations, and so for the first report 5.1, Lorna and or Richard, who would like to outline the report?
Your worship, I would ask Richard White to lead this discussion tonight.
And Richard, I understand you may or may not ask Neil Han of Garnet Wilson Realty Advisors to answer questions as well. So please go ahead.
Just before he starts, may I? Because I have my hand raised. Sorry.
Okay.
So I'm declaring conflict on lot 17. Therefore, I will not be participating of item 5.1. So if you could put me in the weight room, that would be great, Neil. Thank you.
Done. Thank you very much. Bruce, go ahead, please.
Yeah, I'm in exactly the same position as everyone knows from previous meetings. I would want to make a couple of comments before I leave and ask to be put in the weight room. First, I'd like to ask that when we get to actual decisions on sale of road allowances, that these be segmented individually so that I can recuse or step away when it comes to the one on Turtle Head. And I'm sure Carolina will want to do the same with respect to the one near her home. Secondly, with respect to the report we have on section 5.1, where on the 4th page, it refers to consideration for neighboring properties. This has to do with the right of first refusal. I just want to point out that option 1 there is confusing in that it both says that the adjoining property would be invited to match the retail price or the estimated cost or value of the property, and also says it will be a competitive process. So it's not clear to me what would happen if an adjoining property offered, and then the next day we got an offer for 100,000 more from someone in the public. So just that needs to be clarified, the wording. Thank you very much, Neil. You can put me out of the call.
Okay, thanks, Bruce. All right, and I didn't see any new names, which is why I haven't gone over protocol, but as they did, please put your hands up in the gallery for when we allow for the public feedback pieces. We have, just technology-wise speaking, just put them into a waiting room. So they have nice, hopeful elevator music going on for them as we have this discussion. So with that, Richard, would you like to go ahead?
Richard's muted, your worship.
Richard, is this your first Zoom call since COVID started? There you go, I unmuted you. Maybe not.
No, it's still showing muted.
Is that the bottom?
Bottom left.
Are you good to go,
So,
Richard?
I've undertaken to do that. I hope I didn't mess anything up.
We have you now.
Okay, good. Now, the other thing that I was glad that you clarified, your worship, is I thought people were going down to lift weights. They're in the weight room, but now I understand that better. This is my first opportunity to participate in a Belcara Zoom meeting, so I'm bear with me, please.
We usually charge entry fees, so it's a pleasure to have you.
Okay, thank you. The recommendation that we have in front of you has been coming through a process that council and most members of the public that are listening probably are well aware of, but very quickly to review it. There was a report, council appointed a group of committees at the beginning of their term. The Revenue Generation Committee then was one that reported out. They made recommendations concerning ways that revenue could be increased in the municipality from non-traditional, that means non-property tax-based sources. And one of the thoughts that council responded to favorably was the notion of having road ends that are currently not used for, sometimes they're used for casual purposes. There's some, we use the term encroachments, which in retrospect, maybe not the right term, because a road is a road, and people having a driveway on a road, that's a legitimate purpose for a road, but it becomes an encroachment when the municipality decides to sell it and has to do something with the use of the road that no longer is feasible. The Revenue Generation Committee came forward with a series of recommendations. We've been moving through a process that involved appraisals, surveys, an analysis of various types to figure out which are the best processes to proceed with. The Council and the Revenue Generation Committee recommended a few of the various potential lots that could be created. There's no one of those lots, prospective lots, is without some work that's necessary in the municipality to deal with it. And what we've prepared here, this is primarily work that was done by Dan Watson and Laura Beveridge and Brooke Pooney. And also, I'm sure Council will want to focus on the report from the appraisal as well. And that's summarized in the report that's in front of you. But primarily, what we found is that there needs to be several things done if we're going to move forward on these lots. That we have to, we think it's a wise idea to have a land disposition policy. It's typical in other municipalities. We recommend a particular set of land disposition policies that make sense from our perspective as your planners. We suggest, and Council has already spoken to this notion of a right of first refusal, and we can certainly get into that in more detail if we've erred a little bit. But we would have a land disposition policy that would have a right of first refusal for adjoining owners. In the old days, it used to be a requirement. It's no longer a requirement, maybe for the last 25 years, that next door neighbors be consulted and offered property prior to a road being closed. But that's, we think, is still a prudent course of action for the village. We also suggest, because like most of the lots, a majority of the lots in the municipality are smaller than 0.5 acres. The policy, though, is not to allow them less than 1 acre. We think that to proceed, we're pretty well going to have a variation of that policy. We're suggesting that we take a very sort of gentle approach at that, not a broad change to the municipal regulations, but to allow any roads that the municipality wants to close to be have lots created on them that are less than half an acre. And I think, Your Worship, and then we have all the paperwork changes to the zoning OCP that are necessary to have these things occur. We've attached that to the report, and if you're prepared to move forward, we think that we should move forward with the legislative changes as well. Your Worship, I'm here to answer questions. Neil from the appraisal firm is here as well, and I think he is. I'm pretty sure I saw him noted earlier, and we can unmute him too when the time comes if there's a necessary question. But I'll try and answer questions that come up. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. All right, can I get someone to move the item, please?
Move.
Thanks, Rob. Lisa, you're muted. Can you confirm?
I'm mute. I second that
Thank you
report.
very much. All right, I expect, and we should have lots of discussion about this. I don't see any hands up from council for the discussion. There's a fair amount to talk about here.
Oh.
Go ahead, Lisa.
Okay, this was a huge report. Kudos to those that put together. It was very extensive. A lot of nighttime reading, I'll tell you that. I want to talk briefly about, and I'm not sure if this is where I should bring this up, but Lions Bay. Just for the sake of clarity, what happened there. And I think this ties right into whether we're even able to sell waterfront road ends, or I'll call them road ends. I understand that like we talked about this before, Neil, and I think you had said that there was I'm going to use the word loophole, that if we sold, I understand from the charter, if we sell waterfront lots, we have to replace it. The money has to be put in a reserve fund, a special reserve fund. The money has to stay there for council or for the village to purchase replacement lots with access to the same body of water, which I understand is anywhere in Burrard Inlet. So for example, if we sold a place in Belcarra Bay, which is where the water lots are, you could buy one down, if there's one down in Bedwell Bay, for example, or somewhere in Burrard Inlet. You had alluded to the fact that that money could be, we could borrow against it. And I understand from the charter that if we do that, I'm not sure if it's the province who sets the interest rate. So we would have to pay ourselves interest on money for the sale of road ends so that we could use the money to pay down a water debt. So
Would you like people to clear it up as opposed to rehashing what we've already talked about? Make sure, like, we have both Ken and Lorna tell you how it is as opposed to the rehash. Would that be helpful?
sure. Yeah, it just seems to me that it's I'd like the information on from what Lions Bay said, released to the public, and it just seems to me if we're going to dispose of land, the waterfront, just to buy more land elsewhere, we're paying interest. It just doesn't seem to make any sense to me. So,
All right, so maybe we'll get Lorna to answer the start of your first thing, which is what happened. Go ahead,
Sure.
Lorna.
Yes, I reached out to Lions Bay, and it was determined that they sold property on the water, and they purchased property also on the water for a lesser amount than what they sold their original, what they sold their lot for. And so they did buy another piece of property on the water that they're developing as a park. And then they're using some of the funds also from the sale to put stairs down to the water. So it's still, again, providing access to the water. They will put the remaining funds in a special reserve account that they may borrow from. And they do have to pay interest on it and pay it back within a certain period of time. And I believe that is established by the province.
thank you.
All right. Rob, go ahead.
Yeah, question for Richard. It appears to me that everything to do with the road ends has to do with access to a body of water. Is that correct?
Water.
If properties border on the water. So I've dealt with this several times in my career. The Fullerton Fill, which is now where the North Shore Auto Mall is, had road ends that went to the harbor. There's a number of them throughout the inlet. The typical thing was that a federal government came in and said, we're going to create a port here. Meanwhile, the municipalities, or typically the province, had established roads that also went to the waterfront. Public access to the water wasn't necessary back in the old days, particularly for recreational purposes. It was necessary to get your boat down to the water so you could get to, these sort of rules date back to the 16th and 17th century, not necessarily in Canada. It's common law. And so it was a practical consideration, not to belabor the issue, but I think that the general rule, which has been tweaked quite a bit over the years, applies to us, but we should be able to look at it in different ways. Belcarra has an enormous amount of public access to the waterfront. It has regional parks that are available throughout the, in various places and extensively, not just 66 feet at a time. But the rule still applies as if this whole municipality was created as a typical suburban subdivision with 50-foot lots or 66-foot lots extending throughout the municipality down to the water's edge. And even on our next report, we'll find there's a distinction that's very important for our municipality as well. So these are the general rules. Lions Bay has found a way financially to work around the rules, perhaps successfully. We haven't got into that detail yet because you haven't picked lots that you want to sell. But we definitely want to abide by the rules. But we also think that the rules may not be the right ones to apply to Belcarra. We might be able to adjust those rules as we move forward. Council has a lot of thinking to do here, and we'd like to help out, but we don't want to get too deep into it. It's already a complicated topic, and when we get to waterfront, maybe you'll need another report on that.
But there are other lots that are listed, just for clarification, that aren't on the water.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you.
This report.
My point is, Richard, my question is that it deals with access to bodies of water. So one would, thinking outside the box, would believe if we allowed access over a portion of the waterfront lots to the same body of water, of which there's no access at this point. I believe when I read in the government or the charter, one of the two rules, that if a property was sold, the excess funds could be used for capital endeavors, with the exception of DCCs and a sale of parkland property, which would have to be kept. But if we're talking about access, these lots could very easily have a 10 or 15 foot path, if you will, put down to the water, which would allow access, and the remainder could be sold. And it could be used, abiding by all the rules, if you will, it would be excess. And after you develop the path down, it could be used for capital expenditures, not operational, but capital. Would that be somewhat that could be considered?
I think your financial consultant would best talk to that. But I just want to make another quick point. In terms of, for instance, the Fullerton Phil property that I worked on a long time ago, what made sense to us was not to have a 66-foot road right away accessing the harbor every 660 feet. What we did is combined a lot of those. And the Land Title Office was happy to do that. So you'd have 4, say 260 feet of frontage, that's waterfront park, and then a lengthy piece of private land beyond that. So there's a variety of ways that the Land Title Office and other agencies at the provincial government, I think, will be able to assist us in making those determinations if we decide to move forward with waterfront sales.
Okay, thank you.
So a couple of questions, Richard, on my side. Two main areas. First is there's a lot of concern in the letters. There's fairly consistent concern about access if we're going to sell one of the lots that has a trail through it. Is it possible, and if we can just confirm at least for everybody to hear, is it possible to raise title on a lot that may be 66 feet wide of a 55-foot wide title, for example, allowing for that 10-foot trail to remain so that there's no concerns around access through that property? So we don't have to take that entire space. We can take a surveyed area of the lot, allowing for continued access as a path beside the house if required.
Absolutely, Your Worship. We've done, in my career, I've done a number of those types of things where you create a path where maybe none has existed before in a redevelopment because it's a good thing. In North Vancouver City, where I worked most of my career, the blocks were extremely long, 750 to 800 feet. So we created a lot of mid-block pathway systems that are basically rights of way. So the owner is allowed to build on the lot, but they have to preserve a portion of what was, say in this case, a former road end to provide public access. And once again, like the detailed questions about how you use waterfront access, this is another thing that requires further research.
Thank you. That was really important for people who are concerned that their children might have to walk on Bedwell Bay Road by virtue of not having a pathway. An entire lot does not have to be sold. We can maintain that pathway on the side of the lot to ensure there's always straight access and safety for anyone having to walk anywhere near Bedwell Bay Road. My second question, I'd like to get feedback also from everybody, not just Rob and Lisa on this, is around the right of first refusal, or sometimes I without thinking, call it just the ROFR. the premise behind, my understanding of the premise behind the consideration of the sale of road ends in the first place was to enable us to avoid a parcel tax. And the premise also included, I don't think anybody wants to sell road ends. We want to protect them. And if we have 31 road ends for the whole municipality and we have to raise X number of dollars, selling the fewest number of road ends to achieve that sale price required to fund, for example, the water reservoir, that is optimal in my perspective. And so when you see the consideration, I think for everybody to make sure we're on the same page, when you see the consideration of the highest value lots being the water lots as a consideration, it's because we could sell fewer of those. Where if we sold 1, 2, or 3 water lots, we might not have to sell 5, 6, or 7 less valuable lots. And if we're trying to protect village property, we save more land by selling the higher value ones, as long as it's legal and it can be done properly. So I just want to make sure that people understand that. And that leads to my right of first refusal comments, which I'd like to get feedback on. I think in order to ensure that we get maximum value for the sacrifice of selling land, that requires going to open market. I like the idea of a resident, certainly a neighboring resident to a road end, if it's going to go on the market, having the ability to be selected if they're tied with a fair market bid. And I think we would always look to support the resident or the neighbor if it's a fair market bid. But I have trouble supporting anything that doesn't allow for the highest value of that property if we're going to make the sacrifice of selling that land in the first place. So just with that, either Rob or Lisa, if you wouldn't mind commenting, I'd like to get your thoughts on the right of first refusal proposal.
Absolutely. I'll chime in. I believe the wording, I don't think it could be worded better, I think, in option 1, but I think option 1 should also be, as we look at it, not necessarily appraised value, but fair market value, which would include the bidding process. And I don't like anything that's going to guarantee somebody being able to buy a piece of property at something that's being appraised. I agree that appraisers, and this fellow says it was very difficult to come up with values. There are not a lot of comparables. There's COVID out there right now. They mention a lot of negative downward pressure on the market, but I don't see any reference to what's going on in Hong Kong, which is where most of our immigrants are from, or a very large quantity coming to Vancouver. And there is going to be an awful lot of people, I believe, exiting Hong Kong, and they will be headed our way. And I think that in actual fact, our values might go up. I think the demand may go up in the next little while. So I agree 100% on the first right of refusal. I think it should be an open market approach.
Thanks, Rob. I will point out the market is going up. It was between 2 and 3%. So COVID hasn't actually negatively impacted the market. The values are going up. To your point, maybe they get impacted even more positively, but at least they haven't been going down for a long time.
Right.
Lisa, do you have any comments on the right of first refusal or in response to Rob at all, or me? You're muted, Lisa.
Thank you. I was so good last week.
It's okay, don't worry about it.
I agree with Rob Begg as well. I like the right of first refusal, but I also think it should be a fair market value. We just never know. Had we sold these road ends 8 years ago, we probably would have got half than we would today. There's nothing like the investing in real estate, in my opinion. Anyway, so I wouldn't say appraised value. I would say fair market value, because it was a very difficult decision how they came across it. It was mind-boggling, very difficult. So I like the idea of keeping it in the neighborhood, offering it to the owners. But if there's a bidding war, whoever comes out on top.
Okay, thank you. All right, so we're just getting started with residents now. So this conversation is open for as long as we need it to. Jim Chisholm, go ahead, please.
Can you hear me now?
Gotcha, Sherry, go ahead.
Good. I think that I have the answer already to my question, but just to make sure, because I've heard so many contradictions about can we sell waterfront lots? And tonight I understand that we can sell waterfront lots as long as we leave access to the water, be it a 10 or 15-foot pathway. Is that right?
Richard, this is probably best to be directed to you, please.
Well, Your Worship, we haven't got into a detailed evaluation of that yet. It takes time. There's other authorities that have jurisdiction in the province through the Land Title Office. There may be others. The rules have changed since I've last dealt with this topic. There's a consideration that wasn't there before that it may apply to us. It probably does. It's a blanket application, but we'd like to, if we're directed to, because they are, as the mayor says, very valuable pieces of property, and they're not particularly well used by the public presently. In our observation, they're typically on a pretty high bluff, and they might be used from time to time to take a look at the ocean and so on, but they're certainly not actively used. There's trails on other lots that are pretty actively used. So from a planner's perspective, it's not a bad idea to take a look at those properties for sure. And I'd like to think that we can find a way to accommodate everybody's interests. That's what planners always try and do.
This might be a good time for me to add that Council, Lorna, I can talk about our release of decisions, correct?
Yes. Mhm.
So it's a good time. We had an in-camera meeting earlier, and Council has voted to put the entirety of our legal opinion on waterfront road end sales on our website. So in the efforts of transparency, it will be in its entirety available on the website. So for those who enjoy reading legal documents who aren't lawyers, I feel for you, but I also hope that this provides some value for you as well.
Yeah, so I'm still unclear, and I believe through to Mr. White, you're unclear as well whether or not we can sell waterfront lots, even if we allow a walkway for public access. You really don't know.
Not yet, but if council directs us to look into that in more detail, we will.
Well, I mean, it seems rather a shame, quite frankly, to have invested what we have in surveys and evaluations and not even know if we can sell them. I mean, I think everything else should stop until we get that answer. And who will get that answer?
The lawyers.
May I clarify?
Go ahead, Lorna.
We may sell waterfront lots. And what Richard is saying is we don't know if we can sell a waterfront lot and have a pathway down to the water. That's part of it that we would look into. But under the community charter, municipalities may sell waterfront lots, as I stated in the beginning, like Lions Bay did. But there are strict regulations on what you do with that money.
Yes, Lorna, I hear what you're saying, but my question is, or my comment is, if we sell a waterfront lot and we have to buy another piece of waterfront lot of equivalent value, that doesn't work.
Sherry, just a quick comment. The case that Lorna explained earlier was not an equivalent value purchase. And it also didn't indicate whether or not leaving a pathway to the water would require there to be another purchased property, because there wasn't a removed pathway to the water in the first place if we leave the pathway. So there's work to be done on the design of the creation of the title, I think, is also what Richard's talking about. What the final lot would look like is still to be done, but we have absolutely got legal approval that these sales can be done, and that's why we've invested this far. Okay, so I'm going to go to the next question, Sherry. We can talk more about this in a bit. There's someone who's called iPhone. We're going to need your whole name, please, if you're going to be speaking.
No, you just know the answer.
There's someone called iPhone.
Yes, David Goodman here. I'm sorry, I'm at a remote location and I didn't get to register this iPhone.
So put your name in, Dave. Go ahead, please.
Thank you. I have a number of comments, but first, with respect to the interim report, to me, the recommendations seem somewhat disingenuous. On July 20th, you're asked to receive the report, and in the very next recommendation is that you approve a policy that would have a major impact on the village. So surely you need time for thoughtful contemplation and time for residents to also do the same and perhaps provide written comments. So my recommendation with respect to this is that you parse each recommendation and deal with them separately. Furthermore, suggest that you accept recommendation 1, defer consideration of recommendation 2 and 3. Recommendation 4 has not been discussed fully. For instance, while the proposed bylaw may allow for the development of village-owned property, surely the village has no intent to develop. And once they are sold, they're no longer owned by the village. So does this development permission follow? And then why then are those properties being treated differently than others? So with respect to recommendation 4, I suggest that it not be considered an amendment to the OCP, but rather be considered in, when I said it was, I think stated purpose is to seek input on the land disposition policy. Surely that should have read the proposed land disposition policy if you want input and want to consider it. And clearly more time is therefore needed. In terms of the background, there's in paragraph 1, sentence 2, it refers to surplus properties. I don't recall, and I could be wrong on this, that the road ends have previously been considered surplus or declared surplus by our council. The second point with respect to the background, they mentioned the Revenue Generation Committee. They made their recommendations in light of a clear misunderstanding of the charter with respect to seashore. This was pointed out to them early on in the process, and they dismissed it by simply stating, where there is a will, there is a way. I would suggest that in this case, they're wrong, and your own legal opinion, although I haven't read the full reports that are now apparently going to be on the website because I have asked on a couple times for them and haven't got them. But my reading of the summary suggests that they are indeed wrong. Finally, with respect to the interim report, I find it odd that the report fails to consider fair compensation to potentially affected neighbors. That the sale will have a clear impact has already been acknowledged, with 2 councillors recusing themselves from any discussion of the road ends due to pecuniary reasons. So council seems to be taking 2 different approaches here. We don't want to consider compensation, but at the same time, some people that might be affected should have no role in making these decisions. To me, that seems rather arbitrary. In terms of the land disposition policy, I would suggest that adoption at this time is premature. For instance,
Dave, Dave,
I've only
Dave, can you wrap it up? You're over time already, but we can have more
yes,
conversation.
I am. I was speaking first to the report, and now I want to speak to the land disposition policy separately.
Okay,
and
well,
again,
I suggest that adoption would. We're going to have to let some other people ask their questions. You can come back as a second. Let's get through the people first, because to be fair, there's no way we can possibly remember everything you've already said. So let's just take a second. 2 things that are important that I was able to remember out of Dave's comments. We are not voting for any bylaws tonight. There are no first, second, and third readings on this. These are furthering staff work with recommendations. So the presumption that this is actually voting on a decision or a bylaw is incorrect, Dave. I hope you'll recognize there are several more meetings required before anything can be done. This is not the first step of that. This is just furthering work. And if we weren't doing thoughtful conversation with everybody, you wouldn't have just had about 5 minutes of conversation yourself and having more people. So this is part of the thoughtful conversation. Appreciate your feedback and thoughts. And Don Babineau, you're next.
Good evening. 2 questions, if I may. One is, if it ends up being that we are unable to take the funds that we sold from an oceanfront or waterfront road end, if we're unable to put that towards our capital expenditures, does that become a non-starter for us then?
Well, if we can't use the money, why would we sell the land? The goal is to be able to fund essential infrastructure, not to disperse land that just puts money in the bank that we can't use. So from my perspective, and please, Lisa and Rob, if you want to chime in, if we can't use the money, then I can't see that being the solution that we've been seeking from the very start. Rob, Lisa, any other comments? Lisa, go ahead.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And that's what I was saying at the very beginning, that has to be made extremely clear, because to me, it's clear that we can't use the money unless we buy another waterfront property in exchange for the same money. And if we did borrow against it, we have a certain time frame, and I think it was 5 years. We have to charge interest yourself rather than paying the MFA. It just doesn't even make sense to me. So that needs to be really clear. I'm just going to chime in. I like and this is something, and I appreciate Rob Big bringing this up, because I was going to say that as well. I wanted to look in the idea, if we can sell waterfront lots, if we can take a 10-foot chunk or whatever the trail is and sell the other 50-foot side, or 50, whatever it is, 56 and 10, 66, whatever they are, if that would satisfy those requirements. Otherwise, it just doesn't make sense. It's just we're creating more debt for ourselves.
Rob, would you like to respond to Don?
Yeah, Don, I agree wholeheartedly. That's why I'm thinking outside the box here on a way to actually accomplish our goal, which is to have some funds left over on whatever we do from whatever the sale price might be. As far as reading the charter, those excess funds, as I mentioned before, in my view, and I'm certainly not qualified for this, but as a layman in reading it, it clearly states that it can be used, the extra funds that are left over from that sale, if you, in my estimation, provide the same or better access to that body of water. There is no access in most cases right now. A lot of them, as Richard said, do go to a cliff, if you will. And I think there are probably other avenues, as Richard stated, in working with the governments, allowing us to be creative and come up with a way to generate excess funds to pay down the water debt, which then puts us in a much more secure financial footing. And that's the goal. If we can't do that, and I really would be very disappointed at this point if we found out we couldn't, I would then feel like we put the cart before the horse. This would have been the first thing we should have done and looked into before we spent money on surveying, before we spent money on appraisals. But I'm very hopeful that we can, in fact, do this and accomplish putting the village on a much more secure financial footing, which was the original goal. We have to keep the big picture in mind. And that's really all I've got to say, Don, at that point in time.
Okay.
Richard might have something to say because, you know, as a planner, he deals with this, I'm sure on a regular basis.
Your Worship, if I may quickly, another speaker said it was, you know, we've spent a lot of money on this already, but there's lots of options here that we've revealed, and we're focusing on one or two, but there's going to be a number of public processes that will ensue, and council might pick a different course of action. What we've got is a palette now, I think, a group of opportunities that each one of which is probably pretty worthwhile for the municipality to pursue. And there are more as well. We focused on less than all of the recommendations of the Revenue Generation Committee. And we thought of some more, Your Worship, just bear that in mind. We weren't particularly involved with the earlier process, but there might be other things that we can do as well in the future. There's a lot of potential in Belcarra for creating value from property, for sure.
Don, do you have anything else to follow up?
if I may ask the question then that I've asked in the last 2 meetings, and that is, and I don't know if we have clarity on this yet or not, and that is that if we sold a lot for $2 million and we improved access somewhere else in the village, spent $100,000 on improving access down a trail, could we use that remaining 1.9 against the capital expenditures? Right now, it sounds like we couldn't, but as Richard points out, there's lots of access in our direct vicinity with the park and such. So I guess I'm encouraged by what Richard is saying in terms of the palette and the variety of options that are potentially available to us. But I would like to get clarity on that particular question. That is, again, if we sell a lot for $2 million, we spend $100,000 somewhere else fixing up the access, could we use the 1.9 for capital expenditures?
That's part of what we're going to be voting on tonight, which is to give staff the go ahead to continue to identify whether or not that is an option and other options as well for consideration.
Perfect, thank you.
Thanks. Desmond, you're muted, Desmond, and we should get your last name on record, Desmond. There you go.
Yeah, Des Wilson. My question goes to the purpose of the OCP and bylaw amendment. I understand the intent is to restrict that to road ends, to municipally owned land. My question though is, does this in any way set any kind of legal precedent that would prevent us in the future from retaining the current minimum of 0.5 throughout the rest of the village?
Richard, do you want to answer this?
If I may, Your Worship, council never, in people's minds, council may set precedents every time they make a decision, but in practice, and I think the courts have backed this up over the years, is that council has to look at every decision they make from with a clear mind, with an open mind, and not necessarily based on precedent. I'm sure that makes council decision making tricky from time to time, but that's really what it boils down to. And that's council's mission when they set out, when they swear their oath and so on. So I think changing the plan to accommodate smaller lots, which there are a majority of in the municipality. I wasn't around when council chose the 1 acre minimum. I'm not sure why it was selected. It might have been to preserve the, that's a theme in the OCP, the rural, semi-rural character of the municipality. But the die was cast much earlier than that. There's a lot of properties, a majority of properties in the municipality that are smaller than 0.5, and that's part of our report. So it may be viewed by some as a major decision to vary from that from the point of view of benefiting the municipality with the creation of lots, but it's not inconsistent with the pattern of the municipality at the present time. And that's a debatable point, but that would be my perspective, looking at the majority of the lots in the municipality being less than 0.5 acres. No precedent set, but it is typical of what the municipality has in the present time.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you. Penny, go ahead, please. You're muted, Penny.
Okay, thanks. No, just a comment about the lot sizes. It's my understanding that the OCP amendment to create smaller lot sizes, we're going to reflect just village properties. It's not supposed to be a village-wide new amendment, but it's an amendment that would apply just to the village-owned properties.
That is correct.
Thank you.
Anything that would be village-wide, we'd reserve for the full OCP review, as it's far more far more visionary for the village rather than just the lots that we would look to sell. All right, seeing nothing else, what I would propose is we take these 4 different items and provide a little bit of guidance as we have our votes for each of them, because I think there's a bit of a decision for some of them. So Lauren, are we okay to split these up and then make sure that you're clear on what it is our direction is?
Yes, Your Worship, and actually there are 5.
Yeah.
Oh, did I miss it? Oh, there we go. Thank you. So the first, that the road end appraisal report be received. That one's fairly easy. So so shall we get a all in favor that the report is received?
All right.
Thank you very much. That is moved. Second, the land disposition policy be approved. So for clarity, based on the discussion we had earlier, the land disposition policy we talked about, and I think Lisa and Rob, please comment if I'm incorrect on this, but we talked about fair market value, meaning it's got to be open to the market to generate the price rather than the appraised price. Is that correct?
Right.
That's
Okay.
my intention.
Okay, thanks. So for Lorna, when we talk about the policy to be approved, that would be the one that we'd be looking at rather than the other choices, okay?
Yes, okay.
All right, all in favor?
So that, just for clarity, Neil, that's option 1 then. But with the change of rather than full appraised market value, it will be market value.
Just a second.
Yeah, the problem is the option, those three options are, none of them perfectly recommended the way I think we're talking about it, which is that and we're not in the right of first refusal yet, but the idea being open market, and then and the right of refusal, which we'll still get to, that might be within the open market process, a neighboring property can match and therefore be awarded as long as they've matched the highest price in the bidding process.
Okay.
So
Richard, is that clear to you?
So, Your Worship, thanks, Lorna. Your Worship, there's many things that factor into a council's consideration of a land sale, and you might want to just send that back. We don't have to adopt this tonight, but there's some trepidation in my mind of just saying it's whoever bids the most money, because that might not be acceptable to council, and having it as a policy, as a guideline, as a sort of a direction might be the wrong way of going. That might be exactly what council intends, but to the highest bidder sometimes is not the best solution. That's based on my experience over the years.
I appreciate it. What we talked about tonight was, and we can continue to Richard's point, the fact that if we're going to give up land, maximizing the value of the land protects having to sell other land. And so that was why we had talked about the fair market value in trying to maximize the value of the land. Can you give us a circumstance when we would not want to sell for the highest price? And granted, if it's an open market, we could probably put some wording in that we could choose something otherwise. But can you give us an example why we wouldn't want to sell for the highest price?
First off, I think council has to be careful to keep its options open. As a general advice to council, that would be one thing. The second thing is, if somebody creatively came forward and said, look, I understand access to the waterfront is dear in the hearts of many, and we can give you 15 feet instead of 10 feet, which is what you're asking for, right? That would be maybe something that creates value. For instance, one of the things that we used to do in the city of North Vancouver regularly is only take the dedication after the building permit was issued. So somebody doesn't, they might be more compressed on the lot, but the ability to build a house as big as the lot would otherwise have allowed was preserved. So those sorts of things are nuances and kind of details that might be impeded a little bit if council gets a bit, if you just take a hard position on a policy. And we're trying, I think, as planners to give you a bit more flexibility than that, but that's your business. We can also come back with changes later on. I mean, you can adopt it tonight and change it in September. I mean, it's not a OCP amendment or a zoning change. It's something where you have a lot of discretion to make changes as you go along. This is a big new topic.
Thanks. So what I might propose then, at least I'm not jumping ahead, so I will go back to what I might propose then is we consider actually simplifying the recommendation. And what might be consistent with what we've talked about is the process would be open market, and we use that as the policy, which is that it's a go-to-market policy, and not worry about who we would have to award to and what the prices that we'd have to accept, but the fact that we would go to market to see what the value was in the open market. We could consider that. And Lisa, I'll leave it to you for some comments on that option.
Thank you. In dealing with real estate a lot, just because you have a higher bidder doesn't mean that's your best option. I appreciate what Richard White said as well. You may have somebody might come in and say, and if we can do the pathway kind of thing, they give us 15 instead of 10, and the other person was only going to give us 10, and even the 15 foot guy was a little bit less or what have you. There's lots of different scenarios why you would choose a lesser value. And these are village properties, but you see that in housing all the time, residential. You'll have someone say, well, I don't like you. I like you because you're going to use this as a family home and you're going to raise your children here. You're not. You're going to, you know, whatever. And so it's a heartstring kind of a thing too. Not that we vote on heartstrings, but so there are lots of different areas. I'm just wondering if it's possible that we could just take the land disposition policy. This is a lot of stuff to have absorbed in a short period of time. We didn't get this till Friday. I didn't get it until Sunday because I had no intranet where I was. I picked it up. I was able to finally read it. And it's a lot to absorb, an awful lot. So I'm wondering if we could just take that number 2 part, the land disposition, and just have it be set aside or deferred until the next meeting where we have more time to review it, or is that possible?
It's a good question, but what about what we did agree on, which was that it wouldn't be a closed sale, meaning it would be, we would see what the value was on the open market.
Oh, I'm all for open market, absolutely.
So what if
not closed bids?
So what if we just simplify the disposition policy? To Richard's point, we can change it later, but to provide staff some guidance, we just say, look, for the disposition policy, all we're willing to commit to right now is that it should be open market, and leave it at that. That will allow staff to take a look at how the open market process could be managed and not have to worry about considering or going back to closed market processes. Would you be comfortable with at least with the land disposition being at least within the open market framework and then let them continue to work on it?
I would, and I'd like to hear from Lorna. Is that possible, through the chair? How do you feel?
Well, sure. I would like to hear from Richard.
Okay.
Richard, do you think we could amend the policy to the open market, or would you like it to be referred back to staff to bring back in September?
I think a referral to staff would be the prudent course of action, because we won't, we've got instruction or direction, I guess, from council, but we don't really need instruction at this point. We've got you've got a number of other decisions to make in the early part of the fall before we get, before our for sale sign goes up. So I think it would be better not to belabor this too much right now. We can come back with more considered set of ideas for you as we move along. The important thing for us right now is to have some discussion from council, because we need to know where you're thinking, right? And we want to bring that back to you. So we did try and get it forward for before the end of the summer, so that you could, so we had something to work on in August.
I don't mind referring it back, but Richard, you're not allowed to bill us for a penny discussing closed market.
Well, fair enough. I would never do that, Your Worship.
Okay, because that's still in there. So we want to make sure that we you at least heard that part of the discussion. Lisa, you got your hand up again?
Yeah, I just want to clarify open market. We're still considering the right of first refusal to the neighboring owners, correct? So that's not off the table at all. So good. I want to make sure that the neighbors have, if that's what the bid is, if they want to pay for it and whatever, that option comes to them, RFR.
Absolutely. This is really about selling for market value or appraised value. And what we're saying, I think all three of us, is we want to see maximum value achieved, which is
open market
exactly
equals fair market value, because appraisals are appraisals.
Okay, so I'm comfortable to refer it back as long as Richard and Lorna are comfortable with not spending any more time focusing on appraised sales. With that in mind, so we don't need to vote to refer back, do we, Lorna?
Yes, that would be good, Your Worship.
Okay, so if we're going to refer back the land disposition policy, all in favor for referral back to staff?
I should have a mover and seconder, Your Worship.
All right, can I get a mover? Oh, Lisa, do you want to comment before we vote?
I'm sorry, I see that Mr. Chisholm had his hand up before you called the vote.
Yeah, we're already in the voting stage, and I apologize, but we had the public feedback before, so we're now in the voting stage.
Okay, I just wanted to comment on that. That's all.
I appreciate it. So so now can I get someone to move referral of this back to staff? The land disposition policy, please.
I will move that back to staff.
Lisa, Rob, you're muted.
I have a hard time with that. I think that we're here to make a decision, and I don't think that it would be too difficult to make a decision deferring sending it back is what this council seems to do an awful lot of. We can't seem to get to make a decision. So I'll tell you what, I will refer to you, Neil, and I will mirror your vote.
Okay, will you second it? And I'll provide a comment.
I will second.
Thanks. So the comment I'd just like to add as we vote for this, Rob, this is, to Richard's point, not the next step of our process. So it's not holding us up. We've got to select the lots if we're going to sell some, and then we've got to get the approval, and then we can choose how we'll go about selling them. So this is not going to hold us up. And Richard and Lorna have heard loud and clear that we're going to have this as an open market to maximize the value. So I don't think we lose anything by referring this back, is my position.
I hope that's the case. We'll find out as we move forward.
Okay, well, I will vote in favor of this. So all in favor?
I'll vote in favor.
Thanks. Okay. So then the right of first refusal, this, I hope you're hearing us loud and clear, because I think we're consistent, Richard and Lorna, which is that we do want residents to have the ability to match the price and for us to select in favor of a resident, even if it's not maximum price. Okay. Now I know that this is why I'm making sure we're clear on what we're moving here, because if we don't choose maximum price and a resident puts a better offer together, we want the ability to be able to select that resident, not be pigeonholed, to your point earlier, Richard. So how do we reflect that in this motion?
Richard, do you think it is reflected in the motion?
No.
Okay.
So I think why don't we just leave that one aside for now, because it ties into the land disposition policy as well.
Right. Yeah.
So could we just, could you defer that one as well? I think they're connected. And I don't, you know, you're really asking us to think what all the implications are of this and let you make a recommend. You know, I'd rather you defer this till September and us get back to you with something that's more well thought out.
Okay, now let me ask you, if we are not doing a right of first refusal, because a right of first refusal is typically a price point right, and if we are not going to make a decision based on maximum value, and we might make a subjective choice that's not matched on value, which is what a right of first refusal is, do we consider removing the right of first refusal as a policy and yet maintaining it as we select who might successfully have purchased the property? Because if we can't have a policy cover it, I mean, we can't call it a right of first refusal and then have a and then pick a lower number for a resident.
You articulated the concern, Your Worship. So I think you need to have us do a bit more work on that, honestly.
Okay.
Fully.
To Rob's earlier point, I think this goes back to the sale, and so we have time. I think this is the same as the disposition piece. Rob, you got your hand up. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, I was just going to say that if we just have it item number 1 with the open market value and go from there. I mean, it covers everything. Bottom line of it is, if somebody is an adjacent property and they want to put in a bid that's equal or greater to a bid that's already in, I think you're going to have an awful hard time selling property once the word gets out that somebody's going to bid on a piece of property. And, oh, by the way, the neighbor next door can come at the 9th hour and they get looked on more favorably than the people that have been bidding along the way. I think we may be shooting ourselves in the foot if we put that written anywhere in a policy.
So, Your Worship, a typical municipal process would be that you'd receive bids to a certain point in time, and then staff would evaluate those, and then a recommendation would come to council with all of the bids, all of the acceptable bids referred to you for consideration as well. So that process, I think, would be what we would see happening in the fall when you start marketing property. So you'll have a chance to review them all. And I'm just keen to see that you not adopt a policy that's going to be something you want to vary right off the bat, you know. So I would suggest you give us some more time to work on that.
Okay, Lisa, you got your hand up?
Thank you. So I'm suggesting that the recommendation, the first paragraph that we already said, be received, that the road ends appraisal report be received, and the items they're not numbered, but number 2, 3, 4, and 5, the last 4 sentences, just be deferred back. September.
Well, number four needs to be we need to get to work on number 4. That's not something that can be done later. And number 5, I think similarly, there needs to be a recommendation so the actual work can be done on the lot to be tested for approval if it doesn't include a water lot. So those are things that can receive work right now, but 2 and 3 can't.
Okay.
And your worship, actually, because number 3 also refers to the land disposition policy, and number 2 has been deferred back to staff, number 3 should automatically be deferred back to staff in that it's tied into that same policy. And then you can vote on 4 and 5 separately.
Okay, so we'll still need the motion to have number 3 follow number 2 though, correct?
Yes, correct.
All right, so let's take these one at a time. So let's just, can I get someone to move the motion that we're going to refer number 3 back to staff?
So moved.
Thanks, Lisa. Rob?
Second.
Thank you very much. All in favor?
Aye.
None opposed, motion carried. So Lisa, I know where you're going from before, but this is going to be a key piece. If we can't have work done to allow these properties to be under, we can't do any work at all.
I'm good.
You're good? Okay, so
Yeah.
with this motion.
I was just thinking along the line, it's like, you know, like it's such a huge report. There's a lot to digest, but this is something that we have been talking about. So I'm okay with that.
Okay, thanks. So let's move this motion then as it stands, please. Can I get someone to move it?
I'll move that.
Okay, why don't we go Rob first, Lisa seconds. All in favor?
Aye.
None opposed, motion carried. And then the OCP amendment to be able to select up to 3. I'm assuming, Laura, this means it's going to be a recommendation of the 3, or will be presented the 7, and we're going to make the decision next time on which the 3 of the 7 are going to be. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so the next meeting would be the one where we get the chance to do the vote, do the actual selection of the 3. That's going to be a big one. There's a lot of work I'm sure it's going to go into giving us all the information necessary to select those. I'd like giving you time to do that work, especially during our quiet month. So can I get someone to move that motion?
Correct. Would that be ready for September?
Oh yeah, Richard's for sure on board.
Richard?
It's because that's number 5 is subject to the OCP and zoning bylaw amendments. So we have to do those first, and then we'll bring the list back to council, correct?
Yeah, but we could have it done concurrently as long as we just have the item dealt with after the fact, right? We don't want to leave it, we don't want to have one step and have it hold up the whole process on number 5.
Lorna, and your worship, that's what we were thinking. As long as you wanted to move forward with the OCP changes and the zoning changes, because those are important changes, we can then start working on the 5th item there at the same time concurrently. Yeah.
All right, let's give them at least maximum time to do this. So can I get someone to move the item number 5, please?
I'll move, Neil.
Thanks. Lisa, will you second?
I will second that.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
None opposed, motion carried. All right.
Great.
And thank you everybody. And for everybody watching, obviously nothing was committed to yet. I want everybody to understand this process continues to do step by step. So hopefully that followed for everybody and people are comfortable with, and there wasn't more feedback. We can continue to have more feedback again and engaging conversation in the next meeting and more to come. So 5.2, Richard, can you outline this report, please? And you may again call on Neil, I believe, as required.
May I carry on? Yes, Lorna?
Sorry,
Yeah.
Lisa, you've got your hand up, Lisa, go ahead.
Should you be calling back our little friends in the waiting room?
Is this going to be at the same point as we do the OCP? No, this is the port. Let's bring them back.
Thank you.
Thank you for the reminder. I see Carolina back and Bruce, you're back. All right, welcome
Good.
back. So 5.2, Richard White, please go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. So this is something that came as a bit of a surprise to your planners, that the port has done something that's been long awaited, I guess, by the community to reopen what was a moratorium, a prevention of more docks in the harbor. Many of the docks that could be established now are sort of beyond the municipality's jurisdiction. They waterfront lots, directly access to the water, don't have to come to the municipality for approval. But lots in Bedwell Bay that are on Marine Avenue have an intervening piece of roadway and municipal property. Not all of it's developed with the road. And those lots historically, the upland lots have required a highway encroachment agreement. And what we've prepared is a change to the OCP that will allow that to, those highway encroachment agreements to be reissued, new ones issued for new docks, refreshed if necessary, when docks are amended and changed and so on. And in about page 3 of the report, there's a list in darker type that show the various processes that will be going along, which are relatively complicated, Your Worship, but I think known to most of the residents in the municipality. It's more or less the same process that ensued 11 years ago. And actually, a few docks were permitted after the moratorium was declared because the municipality had initiated the process to allow them prior to that. So we're back in business, in other words, and as long as council has proposed, one of the things that staff asked the port is not to barrel on with this without allowing us to change our rules to match. And we've suggested a process that will allow that to happen. We've also suggested things be taken out of the plan because they're no longer applicable. There's reference to groups that don't exist, like the Burrard Inlet Environmental Review Committee, BERC. It doesn't exist anymore. So we've, without assuming that we're going to, this is a fairly focused change, Your Worship, not trying to step on the toes of the eventual OCP amendment, but what we are trying to do is enable the municipality to start allowing highway encroachment agreements, which will then lead to docks being established as well.
Okay, thank you. Could I get someone to move the item?
So moved.
Moved by Carolina. Someone want a second? You guys don't have to go mute if you could. Lisa, are you muted? You're seconding? Okay, thank you very much. All right. I see no hands up for discussion. Nobody ready and raring to go on this?
Yeah, we do.
Lisa, go ahead.
Oh my goodness, thank you. I was just looking for my tricky dicky map chart. I'm not 100% certain, other than what Richard has just referred to, removing the sustainability plan. I don't really know what the full point of that is, other than couldn't it just be amended to remove BERC or those other parties that don't exist anymore? I mean, it was put in place for a reason, and I know when the docks are being built, they're under strict guidelines from the port as to where they can build, what they can build, how they can build, taking environment into consideration, marine surveys, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm not 100% certain why the sustainability study has to be removed. You can enter, that's the number, my first question. My second question, on page 3 of the report, in the middle, under potential wharves, existing wharves, I guess my question is, back when the plan was done and the port chose the specific sites where group wharfs could be built in Bedwell Bay, I call them basketballs because they look like a little orange basketball where they're placed. And it looks to me like the future potential wharfs there would be, it's either 3 or 4. Has the port changed where those future potential wharfs would be? Was my second question. And I think that's it. So is it potentially 3 or 4, and why remove the sustainability study if we can't be amended? I think it's important.
Sure. Richard, do you want to start with the sustainability removal question?
Sure, Your Worship, thank you. So what our thought was, the port has a whole bunch of new rules and regulations that are, they have archaeological requirements, a variety of things that were never considered in the sustainability material that's in the OCP now. Or maybe there was, but it's not in the OCP. It might have been considered, but didn't wind up in the OCP. That's a 2007 document. And since then, the port has had a moratorium, and then they removed it just recently. They have new rules. They're a conscientious bunch, and they have the jurisdiction, Your Worship. The municipality has no jurisdiction below the high water mark. And to have our sustainability, as much as they were good ideas, there is no enforceability. So one of the things that I would suggest you not do as a general rule of thumb is not to adopt regulations that you have no ability to enforce. And this is a series of those. They were good ideas, and they, I think, are reflected mainly in the port's new rules and regulations themselves. So if you want, we can leave it in. It'll be more complicated. It's the amendment we came up with very quickly, Your Worship, and not very expensively either. I know that's a concern, is to do something that is thorough and effective, recognizing the port has most of the responsibility and most of the jurisdiction. So that's my response to that one.
And then the basketballs.
So that's something that's in a sustainability guideline, as well, that we shouldn't allow any of that out there in the harbor. But we don't have the authority to prevent it. Port Moody has tried a methodology. I think the district, I think Lorna told me the district North Vancouver is going to do something too. But that's a separate topic, Your Worship, and we haven't got into it. The once again, the sustainability guidelines suggested or said that the municipality wouldn't allow it, but we don't have the authority.
So if I can just make sure I understand as well, back, support Lisa's question, if we don't have the authority to do anything within Bedwell Bay, it's not worth having the plan at the same time, and it makes it faster and cheaper for us to go forward. Is that a good summary of why we remove this? Why you recommend removing the sustainability plan?
Well, it's not how a planner would put it, but yes.
Okay. Understood. But I mean, effectively, that's what it means. And maybe building on Lisa's question about the basketballs, it says as many as 14, wharf locations were identified, and a smaller number are shown currently. Is there a map that you can share that will show whether those basketballs are still there and where the other? Oh, that's the one that's too big for me in my sheet, probably. So is there something we can publicly show that so people can see where all the availability still remains?
Your Worship, sorry, did I step on somebody's toes?
No,
Your
Richard,
Worship, we think there might be more potential than was shown back in 2007. We don't know exactly. We haven't unearthed the rationale for the locations at that time. But the way the port will work is any upland property, I think, would have a fighting chance to get a wharf. They would really encourage us to require group wharfs. So that would maybe mean 2 or 3 or 4 owners would combine their wharfage, and that means less disruption of the harbor. The environment is preserved more fully, but we don't know yet. But we definitely think that the work that was done in the early 2000s needs to be reviewed as well. But we just want to get on our feet again. There's people probably lined up tomorrow morning, Lorna, to maybe they've already been there already to get a new wharf or dock, and we want to move on with that as quickly as we can.
Thanks. So Bruce, why don't we start Bruce, and if Lisa, you've got your hand up after Bruce, we can do round two if that's okay. Bruce, go ahead.
Great, thank you, Neil, and thank you, Richard. I just wanted to provide a little bit of background as I understand it from the sustainability plan. And as I'm not someone who uses a group wharf, and have often found this to be one of the most complex and convoluted processes we're engaged in. I'm more of an outside observer, but I can tell you that at the time when that process was begun, it was because the port had put a moratorium on any new wharves, period. And basically that was the end of it. There weren't going to be any more wharves. And the village engaged with them saying, we don't believe that this is the limit of what Bedwell Bay can productively utilize without suffering damage, without any environmental degradation. And they accepted that they would consider this if we undertook the assessment, environmental assessments, and we made the case. And that was a 3-year process, the objective of which, insofar as the village was concerned, was to get a few additional group wharf opportunities. And any, of course, would be better than zero, which was absolutely where we were for the longest time. So my caution here is just that that process was long. It was very involved. We started with no prospect of getting additional sites. And I believe by the end of it, we had, and I'm working by memory here, I think we ended up with 3 more, maybe 4. That's reasonably consistent with Lisa, and I look forward to hearing from her. So here's my concern to everyone online. And that is, at one time, the port was not willing to see any additional wharves there. It may be now that in this new day, with their new focus on processes, that's not an issue with them, that they're now happy to see, I don't know how many more, and I'd love to know. But that was the primary driver for the work that we did. And of course, it is couched in environmental terms, and that was one of the concerns that the port and the then Environmental Review Committee and Fisheries and Oceans all had. So I am only leery that if we do away with this, it removes any basis for the port to provide for additional sites. And I guess I'd like to know what indication we have that they're not going to put undue restrictions on additional sites. Thank you, Neil.
Thanks, Bruce. I'll offer just a tiny bit of feedback in the conversations I've had, Bruce, if it gives you any insight. It's not gonna put the matter to bed. My understanding from dealing with the port is that they have identified the sites, and again, I don't have a good map of it, but they have identified the sites without the distinction of why sites aren't allowed and why they were allowed. It's just the lists that are allowed, and the ones that aren't, they don't say why they're not. That's in part to protect archaeological sites. They don't want people to know that that's where an archaeological site, and as a result, go right to it.
Okay.
So the understanding I have, at least, and Lorna, if you've got anything more from Naomi, otherwise just let me know. But my understanding is they've given us every opportunity based on the archaeological and the environmental sites that we're ever going to get. Meaning, I don't know if there's a negotiation after. They've done a lot of work to try to open up as many as possible, and they're trying to get people on the water. They're not trying to restrict it. Was what they said to me. Lorna, do you have anything to add to that?
Yes, I would concur with that, Your Worship. And while we don't have a map with sites, you can have a dock here and not here. What they said to us is, if we receive an application because somebody wants a dock, it will go to them as we're doing our process, and they're very open to the docks being able to be put in on Bedwell Bay.
Lorna, can I just ask, do we have anything from them in writing? I appreciate the port is a big bureaucracy with much more important things to do than manage private wharves and group wharves. Right. But nonetheless, in the past, they were extremely difficult to engage on this. You're telling me at the moment your impression, and obviously Neil feels the same, is that they will not be unduly restrictive of us, but, and I appreciate the sustainability plan was just a document where we had engaged them and they had agreed because they were satisfied we would be environmentally sensitive. But without that, I still worry that they may be unnecessarily restrictive.
We've dealt with them quite extensively over the past few months.
Yeah.
And we do have documents. And today I just received a new document from them too about guidelines. And they are very receptive to, this is opened up now. It has opened up.
Bruce, I can add a little bit of experience in that the one of the early decisions by the port was to identify Farrer Cove as a tier 1 dock area, and
Yes.
And it was within a day or two from my request that they reconsider looking to tier 2, that it was made to tier 2. And then when I realized that, when I was told I should have been asking for a tier 3, it was only days more, or it wasn't months more for them to get back and accept the fact that it was tier 3 in fact. So they have been very responsive and have supported us in both those cases. So I can't speak highly enough on the level of response and support we've had thus far.
Okay, yeah, and I look forward to hearing from Lisa. She's much more knowledgeable than I am. Thank you, Neil. Thank you.
No worries. Lisa, you're up next as well. Please
Okay.
go ahead.
I think most of my questions have been answered. I wanted to just clarify the map where they have the basketballs. That was done by the port way back. They're the ones that identified the site. It wasn't Belterra. And again, I think I'm just reiterating what you said is that it's based on, because there are certain areas that are more sensitive. They've got too much eelgrass. There's just not there. Not every single home on Marine Avenue can have a wharf in front of their house. It's just not physically possible in the bay. So I think that was, I wanted just to ask if they've come up with another a map chart, we'll call it. But I think Lorna answered my question that they're just going to do it on a case-by-case application basis. They'll look at it and someone will say, I want to build a wharf here. And they'll come back and say, yes, or they'll say, no, you can't, because these are the restrictions, or it's identified that the eelgrass, or it goes to flat or to dry, high, dry dock. So you can't build a dock because you can't have your dock floating on the, not floating around. Okay, I think that answered. I've got one more quick question, but unless Rob Begg wants to jump in.
No, you go ahead, Lisa. You're quick.
All right. In the report, it makes page 3 of 3. And actually, before I answer that, I also I don't see him chimed in here, but Jim Chisholm is a real expert on the group wharfs. So if he has anything to add, I would really love to hear from him. But on page 3, number 6, it says group applicants enter into a sub-license agreement with Belterra and are responsible for payment to the village. The way it is now, our license agreements with the port, we're in a tripartite agreement. The village is a consenting party. The village sends an invoice to the group wharf. The group wharf pays the invoice for their license fee. At this point, they're just paying 2 years at a time. That's going to be changing with the new rules. So is this saying here, through the chair to Lorna, that, is this referring to new license agreements or also existing license agreements? And so when an existing group wharf, now when they have their license renewed, they get their 2-year bill. That bill is now going to go to the village, and the village is going to bill the group wharf. And if so, is that going to be padded?
No, it's not going to be padded. But since I've been here, I've actually heard from the port that they are going to change everyone over, and it's just never happened. So going forward, yes, we will be the upland owner, and then the group wharfs will be the sub-license holders. And then I believe this intention still is over time to change all the existing group wharfs over to being the sub-license holder.
Yeah, I know that the existing ones, there's 5 years for them before they go into the new agreement. So,
Right.
But I was just wondering about the fees that they charge, because of the fees now going to come through the village, and then the village is going to have to take the time and the staff time, et cetera, to bill the group wharfs, the 13 of them, I believe we have, or 14. I can't
There's
remember.
13. Mhm.
13, yeah, we have 13, that's right. And are you going to be billing the group wharfs? And then the group wharf pays the village, and the village pays
That's
the
correct.
wharf.
Yes, that's correct. Mhm.
And it's not going to be doubled.
No.
All right, Rob, you're up.
Yeah, I've got more questions than answers on this. I've got so much yellow on the documents regarding this as to statements that are made in it. My understanding on the sustainability plan was that it was not enforceable. The port had to do that, and that's why the removal, although in most cases it is adhered to. So the requirements were there, if you will, when the docks were built. If there was grass for light going through, et cetera, et cetera. I think the touch point of 6 feet by 6 feet was another requirement where we've got instances of very large decks and cement structures on the foreshore. But we talked about recent consultation. I would like to know who is involved in the consultation. Is it just Belcarra? Are we talking about North Vancouver? Are we talking about our mayor? Are we talking about our CAO? Who was involved in the consultation? I've been asked this by many residents, and mostly due to the fact of the licenses going where they went. So if somebody could clarify that, number one question.
Well, first of all, the licenses went where they went. That was 11 years ago because there haven't been any new licenses except for the ones that the mayor mentioned just happened to slip through the cracks as it would be at the port. Negotiations have taken place now with myself, and Mayor Blinky has had some involvement in that in moving forward. We are the only, and yes, Port Moody and District of North Vancouver were involved in discussions with the port lifting the moratorium. Belcarra is the only municipality that has group forfeiture. And so this report that we're working on is strictly for Marine Avenue and St. Clair and is unique to Belcarra.
Okay, you also make a statement on page 2 that says staff believes the new port application and review process is very thorough and it will be applied throughout Burrard Inlet to our neighboring municipalities. That would infer that those municipalities have not bought into the process.
They have, the moratorium has been lifted in those other municipalities, and
So-
they're different than us. Because they do not have group forfeitages.
Okay, so this pertains
They
to
have
group
single
wharf.
docks. This report is to do with group forfeitages.
Great group wharf. That was my next one because the new dock approval process doesn't mention anything about individual wharfs. It's
That's already open and good to go.
correct. No, what you're talking about, there's also individual wharfs are proposed in Bedwell Bay. So I guess the next question that I was asked by a resident was, is the move to turn all of the individual wharfs into group wharfs in Bedwell Bay?
No, there would be no intention to do that, Your Worship. And there may be opportunities for individual wharfs in Bedwell Bay on Marine Avenue and St. Clair. That has not been ruled out.
Great. Okay. So just in going further here, we refer to rules and regulations and questions and processes and new application forms. At this point in time, have any of those been done? Have they been completed?
No, Your Worship, they have not.
So they haven't been completed or started. Okay. And the other thing is recovering village costs. So if the port is going to be billing the village and the village is going to be billing the group docks, obviously the village is going to want to recover their costs for doing that. Is that correct?
And a report would come back to council with a review of what the charges would be.
So that would be a new charge, basically. Would it?
And Rob, just, it's also worth adding, the port was very generous in giving us a $10,000 grant to be able to do the work we're doing now. So it's not at cost
Yeah, Neil, all I'm doing is I'm referring to questions that have been asked by people, myself on this. And the last thing on this page 3 was land survey work. Another question was that when you actually apply for a dock, you have to have a survey done. So what does 3, land survey work, what does that refer to from the village perspective?
That refers to the property that the village owns, and that where the highway encroachment agreement would be, we would have to establish what the boundaries are for the highway encroachment agreement.
Okay, okay. So that's boundaries. And we don't have anything at this point in time that documents the current boundaries?
No, and your worship, Richard had his hand up.
Richard, do you want to add anything?
If I may, your worship, I think the original survey, the best I've been able to determine in 1913 or so, the original survey had Marine Avenue with what would be an eastern edge, which is where the properties front onto, but that the western edge just went into the harbor. So the municipality's land, and Bruce might be Councillor may be able to correct me on this, but it looks like the Marine Avenue, it undulates. It's wider in some parts and narrower in others. And in almost every case, I think it's wider than a typical road. So there's many potentials that exist for the more creative use of that road right of way in the longer term. So what I think we should do is look at a typical road width and find out what surplus property may exist along that stretch. And that's what I'm suggesting there. And there will be probably a few dollars left over from our $10,000 grant to enable that to start. But I think it would be prudent. The way it works now is that individual property owners, upland property owners, have to do a survey, but it just runs into the Bedwell Bay. And it doesn't suggest how much property is involved and so on. And I think it probably was wise to be vague about that in years past, but typically Bedwell Bay is far below the level of Marine Avenue, and there might be more property to deal with. As you get farther north, it's not as desirable a situation, but for the municipality, there might be other things that are in the existing sustainability plan in terms of access to the waterfront and so on that could be realized once we know what we've got. So that's why we're suggesting doing a survey.
My understanding was that the western boundary was always high water mark.
That's what I was just trying to say. But your worship, that's exactly what I was trying to say. But the distance between the eastern boundary and the high water mark is quite often well more than a road width. So other things could happen in that area. The municipality could take advantage of that.
Okay, we'll look forward to your thoughts and ideas in that regard. Rob, is that it for your list? Can we move on?
That's it for my list. Thanks for bearing with me.
No worries. Bruce, you're up next. Go ahead, please.
Thanks, Neil. Yeah, Rob, I just wanted to say you'll become much more familiar with group wars before we're done, I can assure you. They are an extremely complicated process. I don't know the answer to Richard's question with respect to the roadway down there, but it wouldn't surprise me. You seldom do we do a survey in Belcarra without having some surprises. A question about a process under on the I guess it's page 4. I think the last page of the report. Step 1 is the application request permission from Belcarra. It's a little different than where we used to be, as I understood it. We had a limited number of sites where it was possible. I gather from this description, anyone on Marine, I guess, or any group can apply to the village. But how will the village determine whether it's even feasible? Or are we just going to say, yeah, that group's fine, and leave it to the port to try to work out whether they can accommodate them?
Lorna?
Well, I believe your worship, this is what we're still in the process of determining. Richard, do you have a?
This is, your worship, this is the ports list. how they figure it's going to
Okay.
work.
All right.
So we haven't, we haven't agreed to that particularly, but it may work quite well. We already have some that are identified sites, but we're bound to get some more as time moves on, because the port, as I think others have said, is they're fairly open to proposals. So right now we're limited by the dots on the map, or the basketballs, and we're looking at changing those things. But how that will all transpire, I can't really say just yet. But what we want to do is work on the what's available to us now, and then broaden it if council's desirous of doing that later.
Yeah,
Bruce,
I don't
Bruce,
disagree.
Bruce,
Yes,
can I just add another point, Bruce? Just building on what Richard said, the port's communication to me was that step for Belcarre's approval was necessary because they would never approve a dock that Belcarre wouldn't approve of. So they wanted us to, they would respect us not wanting to approve a dock, and they wouldn't supersede an approval if we didn't support it.
Okay, I appreciate that, and it's very, very positive, indeed consistent with you and Lorna both said, Neil, that the port seems to be very engaging and positive on this. I guess I tend to try to look to the practicalities of it, and I just wonder, because I agree, and I'm sure the questions that have gone to Rob are consistent with the fact that there is an enormous amount of interest, as indeed, why wouldn't there be, when people who have waited this long suddenly can see the prospect of actually being able to get access to the water and get boats and a site they can use. So I can see a great deal of enthusiasm. I'm just worried about how we ensure fairness and openness in terms of process, and I guess that's yet to come. I would like Lisa, I'd very much like to hear, if he's on the call, from Jim, because he has a great deal of experience with doing these successfully, and I've got a lot of time for his opinion on these sorts of processes.
Thanks. Lisa, go ahead. Hang on, Lisa, you're muted.
Sorry about that.
No.
Too busy looking at my binder. This isn't just, I think we just have to be clear, it's not dealing with just group wharfs. We're dealing with Bedwell Bay, which is the north end is single only. The middle part from Kelly Road to Young is group wharfs, minimum 4, maximum 6. And then in the head of the bay is group or single. So there's a choice there that's set out in the, I believe that's set out in the OCP. It's also in the sustainability study. So, so it's not just, we shouldn't always just refer to group wharfs. It's new docks in Bedwell Bay.
Exactly.
I just wanted to clear that, and thank you, Lorna. And then it's almost like on page 3, where items 1 through 6, it's almost like number 3 should be number 1. You know, like, because an applicant would come in and say, okay, there's so many of us, 6 of us or 4 of us or 5 of us or whatever, we want to build a dock in here. The sites have to be identified, or do they identify a site and say, I want to build here, this is our upland owner, I want to build here? You approve, how can you approve them if you don't even know that a site's even viable? So it's almost like they got to go to the port first.
Some of them are concurrent, actually. You know, we had to write out a process. But when we deal with something, we'll be dealing with the port almost at the same time.
Okay, great. Thank you. And I also would like to hear from my good friend, Mr. Chisholm, if he's willing to talk.
So if we go to residents, I'm assuming this is Ben Shulistani. That's the Ben Shulistani, or is it just Ben Shul? Okay, so that's Ben Shulistani, right? So we'll fix your name for you. Go ahead, Ben.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, first, I have a couple of comments. The first comment, I would like to respond to what Mr. Bruce Derrick calls complicated. I think it's fairly clear from the letters that the residents and the upland owners on Marine Avenue have received, because as everybody knows, Bedwell Bay is fronting Marine Avenue, and those who are eligible to build a dock have already received an official letter from the port confirming their eligibility and encouragement to apply for a dock. So to answer Councillor Derek's question about complexity, is actually fairly simple and straightforward. But what the port has done, they have already made all the assessments, have identified the eligible locations, and sent letters to the upland owners in this regard. So that's my number one comment. Number two, I think Councillor Lisa Wilder should declare her a conflict of interest when talking about limiting building docks in Bedwell Bay. She's not an upland owner. She does not live on Marine Avenue, but she lives outside Marine Avenue. I believe in Main Avenue, but she basically talks about limiting docks on Bedwell Bay and talking about what could she try to make up as potential basically excuses not to allow docks. So I think she should identify her conflict of interest before commenting such strong comments, totally baseless. So that's my second comment.
All right, thank you. Jim Chisholm, we've been waiting for you.
Unmute.
There
I am. You got me again. I wanted to ask, when can the people in Bedwell Bay, particularly the areas where you don't have to have a shared wharf, how soon can they get the paperwork to make application?
As soon as this process is completed.
And when might that kind of guesswork be?
Richard?
So we're, Your Worship, we're hoping to have a public hearing in a meeting in September.
Right.
If council passes the resolution that we've put to you, we have some notifications to do to other municipalities, First Nations, Metro Vancouver, the port and themselves. But if all that goes smoothly and staff can produce the updates, I guess, to the various licensing processes and so on. It is complicated. I've noticed that too. It'd be nice to simplify it, but we want to just basically get it started again. And that'll be primarily your busy staff's responsibilities. So we'll have to fit that in. But with any luck, by the end of September, you might be up and running.
So you don't, you're going to do that for every property rather than just the people who've applied?
Well, the rules would, sorry, if I may, Lorna, the rules would apply to everybody in Bedwell Bay.
Yes.
So
as many lots as you have.
The Marine Avenue situation applies basically to the whole eastern side of Bedwell Bay.
Oh, because there's an area where they're individual wharves, not shared wharves.
Right, and my comments basically have been about about both all the way through here. Yeah.
So you will have to check out every lot, or not just the ones that are applied for.
We would be,
if people don't know,
we're working through the process right now, Sherry.
Yeah, like if you don't know which ones are applying, then how can you check into which one?
We will have a priority order, just like the port does, for when the process starts. The port is accepting 2 applications at a time now, and we will be bringing a process back to council for approval for the process that we will be using.
I believe the other municipalities, North Van and Port Moody, have started their business, and it's going to make our folks pretty far down the road. We're all going to die of old age before we get into the port.
Our individual docks outside of Bedwell Bay can apply at the same time, could start applying at the same time as Port Moody. So the only difference is for the shared docks, of which we're the only municipality who have them. That's the process that's being held up. But like Port Moody, everybody with the individual docks outside of Bedwell Bay could apply the day the moratorium was lifted.
Everybody outside of Bedwell Bay, even if they're individuals, but they have to wait for the rest of it. Because
Bedwell Bay is where the OCP amendment is required for Bedwell Bay, is my understanding, and everyone else was able to apply day one when the moratorium lifted.
Oh, because of course Jim's had contact with people. They want to get his help, and we don't know where to get the papers to start for them.
Oh, okay.
So, Your Worship, the fundamental thing is in Belcarra, if you have direct access to the water, then you're away to
No,
the
these
races.
all-
No.
No, these all have the Belcarra municipality is in front of them.
Only on Marine Avenue.
Yeah, that's correct.
So anybody else that has direct access to the water can apply now for the
Yes.
wharf.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, Lisa. You're muted, Lisa.
It's Bedwell Bay from basically West Road up to Senkler, Marine Avenue up to Senkler. So all of Bedwell Bay is what is under the current moratorium. Belcarra Bay, Turtle Head, all those ones are all clear.
Yeah.
I think that was Sherry's question. Does that answer that a little bit better or not?
Yeah, that's good.
Okay, and
That's
they're
excellent.
held up, those single wharfs down on the Senkler side.
Yeah.
They're held up because they're in Bedwell Bay and because there's the road in front of them, the Marine Avenue in
Okay.
front of them. And as to Mr. Shulastani's comment about conflict, I didn't say that Belcarra it wasn't up to Belcarra, it's up to the port to decide as people apply. It's not up to Belcarra or an individual councillor or a council decision as to where those docks are going to be. I was just providing some clarification from the previous, when the moratorium had been lifted or when they had been able to build docks, and that's where the sustainability study came in. That was long before me, and it was docks were chosen back then. Whether they're still using those same parameters or not, I have no idea, and it's not up to council to make those decisions. But I'm willing to get legal advice on this if that would make other people feel more comfortable. I've considered it because I am my husband and I are a dock owner down on Marine Avenue, and I have no problem obtaining a legal opinion on it, if that would satisfy Mr. Shulastani.
Carolina.
Thank you. Just a quick question. Do we have to do this through the OCP, or could this be its own policy separated from the OCP, therefore giving you more freedom to amend without a whole bunch of public hearings? Thank you.
No, this is a required OCP amendment.
Through the OCP. So you couldn't take that out of the OCP and just do its own policy?
Richard put his hand up, Your Worship.
If I may, Your Worship, that's more or less exactly what we're suggesting, is simplifying the OCP, making some general comments. You'll see in the proposed amendment, which is attachment number 1, making some general comments about working with the port for access to the water and so on in Bedwell Bay. And then we're going to have an administrative process without the need to change the OCP. So what staff did very early on in discussion with the port is said, look, we're going to need to change our OCP so that we can accommodate this these new changes by the port. And that the port has said that even in the documentation that's on the website and in the webcast that they had in terms of the consultation process, they made a point of referencing Belcarra having these unique situations. And I think they've been very respectful of that. But now what we have the opportunity to do, as long as council is agreeable, is to simplify our rules and regulations as well. And not just the OCP, but ideally we're going to have other things that we can simplify, make it easier for us to administer. So yes, the answer to that is yes.
Thank you.
Jim or Sherry?
Jim here. It's a question for Laura. Did the port supply you a detailed chart with every lease document in the village in Bedwell Bay now? Have they given you up to date?
All that information, because we manage all the files for all the existing group mortgages.
Okay, but did they give you a chart that shows every lease all the way from one end of the bay to the other? every one of them registered and numbers and the survey?
Not the numbers in the survey, no, but
Because they do have that in each
yes.
and every one. It would be wise for you to get a hold of that because it'll be required to take a review looking at all the gaps. And
For
when they
sure, thank you.
start to extend the property lines, because as we know, usually there's an upland owner required in part of the group wharf lease. Not that they can't put a dock in front of somebody else's without their permission, but it's normal.
Right, yes, thank you, Jim.
Anyways, if you need some help with that, I can help you with that because I've got a lot of it as well, but I would rather see you get the copy from them that's current.
Okay, thank you.
I can help you with some other stuff if you ask.
Okay, thanks.
And on top of it all, Lisa's not in conflict in what he's talking about. There'd be dozens of people there that'd be in conflict if they tried to accuse her of this one.
Okay, noted. All right, so seeing no other discussion, I'm assuming that there's been no move to separate these points. We can treat this almost as if it's a consent agenda. We've moved it already. All in favor? So I see Lisa, Carolina, Bruce, Rob, are you in favor?
Yes.
All right, thanks. All in favor. So none opposed, motion carried.
Thank you.
Good discussion, people. Thank you.
All right, so 5.3, Ken, if you can outline this report, please.
Thank you, Richard.
Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Ken, you're muted.
How is that?
Putting up some stuff.
Now we can hear you.
Are you showing that on purpose? Sorry, that doesn't look great.
Stuff up there.
Ken, do you want your report shown?
No, that's all right. I'm just
No.
trying to, my computer's a bit frozen here, but there it is.
Go ahead, Ken.
Yeah, so this is the first of 3 budget variance reports that are called for under the village's policy. So this looks at results year-to-date June 30th and provides a projection of estimates based on those results. And it provides the detail variance analysis for the village's 3 operating funds: the general operating fund, the water operating fund, the ward operating fund, and then the variance report on the capital, which includes general water and, of course, ward. And so the detailed explanations of the various projected variances are shown in the appendices A, B, C, and D, which are attached to the report. And just as a summary, I'll go through on page 2 of the report, starting with the general fund. The fact of the matter is, when we look at the general fund on page 2 as a summary, the revenues are expected to be under by approximately 21,000 by year end, or minus 1.6%. That's the regular operating expenses are expected to be under budget by $40,000 for a 3.63% positive result. And this will allow the village, the net of those, to be able to transfer approximately 18,000 more to the village's general surplus and reserve accounts. So at the end of the day, it matters where regular operating revenues are in comparison to regular operating expenses. And we can see in the general operating fund that we have some lower revenues, but that are projected because of COVID-related situation, but those have been more than offset by COVID-related savings expenditures for things like travel, conventions, conferences, training, and things like that. So we're expected to be in a more favorable result at year end by being able to transfer more money to reserves and surplus in the general operating fund. So then we go into the water operating fund summary. And in the general operating fund summary, we have a situation where revenues are expected to be right on track, regular operating revenues with budget. On the expense side, we're expected to be about $4,400 under budget, which will allow us to transfer a larger amount again to the reserve fund, the water reserve fund, and to the surplus. And as a result of that, the transfer would go from approximately $64,000 for those things to $69,000 or $70,000 roughly. And in the ward operating fund on the next page, you can see that again, regular operating revenues are on track with budget, and the regular operating expenses are expected to be $2,400 under budget, which would allow again a bit more money to be transferred to the reserve fund of $2,500. So the operating funds are looking positive at this point in time, but of course, this is early in the year, of course, as well. And in the capital area, if you look on the same page as the ward operating fund, you can see in terms of capital expenditures, general capital expenditures are budgeted at $375,000 for 2020. About $25,000 is spent year to date, and we're expected to be spent about $224,000 by year end in general capital. So the projected variance is lower capital general expenditures of about $150,000, and that is really about a 40% reduction. And in the water side, there's about an 98% reduction in water capital expenditures are projected, mainly because construction of the new water reservoir is not expected to occur in 2020. And in the ward area, we're expected to spend all of our capital funds of $4,000. So the village is on track with its budget targets, and you know, we're unique, I guess, in Belcarre, in that many communities have been negatively impacted by COVID in terms of a loss of major facility revenues that they're not collecting. And Belcarre is rather fortunate that they don't rely on those type of revenues, and their revenues have been looked to be minorly affected, but they've been more than offset by COVID-related savings in some expenditure areas. So we're not in the same position as a lot of communities that have been affected by COVID, which will be seeing large budget shortfalls because of loss of revenues. So the details of this review are on page 4 to 8 of the report, and those are the appendices, and it shows some explanations with the major variances that you can see there, where there are variances that are expected on both the revenue and the expense side in the general fund, which is on page 4 and 5. And then on page 6, we have the water operating fund variances that are projected. And on page 7, we have the ward operating fund. And then on page 8, we have all of the capital projections where we're expected to end up at year end. As I've said, this is the first of 3 variance reports that will be coming to council. And so we're basing this information on spending to June 30th, plus what we know of events to come, and an extrapolation from June 30th to end of the year. So overall, things are on track in terms of the budget, and we'll continue to monitor things. It should be noted in the general operating fund that the transfers to reserves and surplus that are projected to $279,000 do not include Community Works gas tax funds and any proceeds from land sales that would go into a land sale reserve fund, because these are dedicated revenues that have to be allocated to those reserves. And Community Works funds of 57,000 would be going to the Community Works Gas Tax Reserve. And any monies from land sales would be going to the Land Sale Reserve Fund.
Thanks, Ken.
So that's the crux of the report, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, Ken. Can I get someone to move the report? Thanks, Rob. Anyone else?
Second.
Second, Carolina. Okay. Not seeing any questions. All right. Shall we go to the vote? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
None opposed? Motion carried. Thank you very much, Ken.
Okay, thank you.
Simple to the point and under budget, which is the most important part.
Yes.
5.4, Stuart, if you can outline the report, please.
He's muted, Neil.
Yep.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'd first of all like you guys to know that we read the tree committee report very thoroughly and took into consideration all of the aspects of the report into account when structuring this bylaw. As stated, and if the bylaw moves forward, we'll begin writing the permit process and the related policies and procedures immediately, which will reflect more closely the particular issues the tree committee report put forward. But getting to the actual report itself, once again, my mandate was to provide comments on the report itself and create a bylaw. So a lot of the start of this report may not speak directly to the actual bylaw itself, because some of them were actual action items requests. So as you see on the, let me see here, on the first page of the report, the recommended actions for follow-up are invasive species, interface wildfire management, and issues relating to the tree bylaw. So pending direction from council, we can move forward on those issues pending council's approval.
Thanks, Stuart. Can I get someone to move the report or bylaw proposal motion?
Moved.
Thanks, Bruce. Someone second it, please. Can I get a seconder? Can someone second it, please?
Second again.
Thanks, Carolina. All right, guys, come on. Let's get off the mutes a little. Let's get going here. We're getting late. Any discussion? Let's start off with Carolina.
Yes, please. Thank you. Okay. So through the chair, so Stuart, when the committee brought forward the recommendations, it was decided really early on during the meetings that the committee had, well, I'll put it in those words, that the committee had no jurisdiction and they didn't want to deal with private property, with trees and private property. And I see that, and the reason for that, because we wanted to motivate people to cut trees around the properties, trees that are not healthy or trees that are too big and going into someone's view. And the committee decided that putting a permit for this, for trees on private property, it would just work against to what the committee was trying to do initially, which is, again, motivate people to cut all of the dangerous trees around. So, but I do see a reference here that we are talking about having permits to cut trees on private property. So I just want to hear your comments on that. Is that a reason for that, or how did that come about?
Yes, thank you. There definitely was reasons for that. You know, once again, there were a lot of different issues presented in that tree committee report, and some of them were actually conflict with each other a little bit, talking about views, talking about maintaining the beautiful, pristine area that we have, and then also the fire risk that's presented in it. And within that, also the riparian areas. So that's where that came into play because I put it in there as a proposal. And it actually is, to me, it's a big part of the bylaw. First of all, because, you know, most of the municipalities have that. And you guys in the report do actually refer to it a couple times indirectly. But I put it in there in order to manage the riparian areas and to, and in the same spots, manage the replanting. So in other words, in municipal, you know, the riparian areas, the creeks travel from, you know, from high to low. They travel through the municipal property and then right through a lot of areas that have residential properties. And it didn't seem logical to not consider all the riparian area of the municipality, but then stop at somebody's property line. And so that was part of it. And the other part is for the fire safety issues. Once again, if someone were to cut a tree down, apply for a permit and cut a tree down in the riparian area, then there's the opportunity in policies to implement the replantation process that the tree committee was hopeful to get in. Other than that, like with fire safety issues, I think kind of long term with respect to that, because I don't want to be in a position where we're working so hard to implement a new bylaw. And, you know, I know there's so many different opinions on it. I want to make sure that it's something that will still look up to date, you know, 5 years from now. And with myself, if I think about fire safety planning and, you know, the things coming down the road, I know council is very concerned about the water for firefighting. For me, that's an issue. There's also an issue with egress. You know, with getting out of the municipality, we only have 2 roads and some water to get out. And so I just think about how the trees are encroaching on Bedwell Bay. And I think long term, I think about where I'll be wanting to push is to kind of open up the aisles of egress or the exit paths. And a lot of that will be municipal, but someday down the road, council may consider having a zone or a tree replanting process for the residents as well along that area, so that you don't have large cedars and, you know, because they're all just draping over that road. And if there was a fire in there, that would be very limiting, or possibly very limiting.
Okay. But in case of that, you cut the trees that are, no person shall cut or remove a tree that is 20 centimeters DBH or greater, in which 5 meters. So that part's so under prohibitions on 4.1. So you're saying that your main reason for that was to protect the riparian zones, correct? But that applies to all of the properties, so not just the riparian zone part of it, correct?
Yes, that does.
So perhaps, you know, in my opinion, it would be best to say, like, you know, under 4.1, say on riparian zones, and not get a permit from people that simply want to cut a big tree on their yard that's been there for a while, maybe it's half dead, and now they have to ask a permit to ask for a permit to do so, which is just another bureaucratic step, right? You're creating a bureaucratic step that it wasn't there before.
Once again, passing this bylaw is at the discretion of council, and you know, obviously we would take any recommendations and try to put them forward and make them work. That would also be a little bit limiting with some of the other fire safety type of issues that might come down, depending on, you know, what kind of business cases and stuff I can put forward later on down the road. You know, it would definitely limit any other option. And don't forget the 20 centimeters diameter DBH and 15 feet, 16 feet high is actually, you know, I tried to put that in like that so that it only is meant to address significant trees, like any alder that may be 35 feet tall, but it's only, 6 inches wide. You've seen many of those. That wouldn't account for a permittable tree.
Yeah, correct. Okay, I would like to hear what the other councillors have to say for now, and then I would love to hear from Sandra Chapman, which was the chair of the committee. So I believe she would have some thoughts on that. Thanks, Stuart. My comments are these ones for now, but I might go back on. So, thank you.
Bruce?
Thanks, Neil. Yeah, I had the same reaction on first reading it. It really struck me when we began to address the trees on private property. I know it's been an issue in other municipalities, and Stuart, I think you explained your case well. And personally, I'm a bit conflicted because I am paying a lot of attention to the firefighting issues here. But it strikes me as, personally, at this stage, as too aggressive a proposal. I would much rather be in a position where we've done what we can on public land, provided encouragement and education to property owners, and maybe move on to this later. My experience in the past with telling people what they can do on their own property has not been a happy experience at all. And I think trees, given the number we have, are likely to fall into that category. Having said that, I appreciate that, your goal here. I think you've explained it well, and I do appreciate many municipalities do it. I'm just not comfortable with going that far at this stage. I might be open to it in future once we've made progress on the risks in terms of public lands. Thank you.
Thanks, Bruce. I'm going to prioritize Sandra ahead of the other people who are on the list, just because as the head of the tree committee chair, as the chair, she can provide a lot of feedback and guidance that other residents may be able to comment to as well. So Sandra, go ahead, please.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
We can, thank you.
Okay, thank you. I just want to start by reading an excerpt from the presentation that was proposed. And the excerpt reads, any definition that were not included in the bylaw was due to the definition was not being included in the language of the bylaw. Other definitions were altered to more accurately define the terms within the new bylaw. And I have 4 questions, and some of these have already been answered. But the first question was, how was it decided which definition had the merit to be included within the new bylaw and which didn't?
Thank you for the question. Well, once again, I tried to use as many of the recommendations as possible from the tree committee report. But, when you're creating a bylaw, you don't want to confuse the issue by having a whole bunch of definitions that you're not even using in the language of the bylaw itself. Other than that, smaller things like it could have been adding a few extra subtleties to the width of the trees. I think the tree committee report did talk about 1.4 meters DBH, 20 centimeters. I think they had it in there. But I also put the height of the tree as well in there so that it would not be so imposing on residents. Once again, I'm really not, like with myself, I want to try to create a bylaw that looks good in the future, that reflects council's and the tree committee's findings. And this bylaw is, I didn't want it to look imposing, and I knew it was going to be impactful having a bylaw that included residential properties, but the intent is only to address some fire safety issues in the future, and also to address the riparian areas, because once again, the riparian areas go into residential property. So my proposal is going to be that there's 2 different permit processes, 2 different permit applications. one for municipality or cutting trees on municipal property and one for cutting trees on private property, which is actually reflective of the West Vancouver's bylaw as well. So that I was also taking into consideration.
Okay, so now that you've explained that, I think that the riparian areas within our community are easily identifiable, and as are the properties that flank those riparian areas or are within the boundaries of those riparian areas. I really feel that this was a blanket statement, and the riparian areas being used as a means to go after all residents to make an application to cut trees within their property. And I don't think that that's a fair manner of approaching this. The other major question that I have is, why was the maintenance plan by staff removed from the proposal? Because that was also part of our proposal, as well as you're allowing BC Hydro to cut trees, top trees with impunity, because your bylaws don't basically make them an exception to the rule. And topping trees is one of our major concerns with having unsafe trees along the roadway as well. So those two issues really concern me. I think it's really important that you also take into consideration that our committee didn't just come up with these bylaws on their own. We took an enormous amount of time to review bylaws by other jurisdictions, and these included Lions Bay, West Vancouver, North Vancouver, Squamish, Port Moody, Anmore, and others. So we didn't make up these bylaws. We didn't make up the definitions. These were existing bylaws, existing definitions that other jurisdictions have used, and we use them to tailor our own specific community needs. So I'm a little bit upset when I read what I've read, and so much hard work has been ignored. So further to that, we carefully took our time in creating the bylaws that we submitted, and the alterations by staff, I suppose yourself, now that I know who it was that wrote it, alter the carefully thought out intent that our committee had in our objectives. So yes, you've covered them to a certain extent, but not to the level of the power in which we were hoping to achieve. The recommended fire buffer between residential properties was also completely somewhat ignored. It was somewhat covered, loosely covered, I would suggest. And I recognize that this is a point of contention with many residents, but I really do feel that is something that needs to be discussed, because I really do think, and most of our committee did feel, that we are all responsible for fire prevention in our community, and trees are part of that. So the measures that you used to negate that requirement was the community can educate themselves. Well, this is true. However, you know, that requires that all residents take the time to educate themselves. And how do we measure that? You know, there is no way of measuring that. Yes, we have a lot of residents that are highly involved in our community, but some who are new to the community, who are not involved, who don't really look up things through our village website. Another excuse was the lots in Belcarra Narrow. Well, currently, and I say currently because we're looking at road ends, the minimum lot size is 0.5 acre. Vancouver lot size minimum is 33 feet. We don't have anything near that dimension. You also state that fire smart measures are best applied at development of a property. That's actually not entirely true. You can achieve it also by enforcing or passively enforcing that trees be cut or removed when property's for sale. For example, just as our water system is being achieved and the hookup to that water system is being achieved. So, you know, going after the penny, which is the application for permit by residents to cut a tree within their property or trim a tree if it exceeds the 8 inches, is not really big picture. The village's hunger for funds can easily be satisfied with our lots, our properties naturally evolving as we remove the large conifers, remove some of those fire hazards that are currently bounding from one property to the next, and opening up views potentially. Not everybody's going to get a view, obviously, but maybe the people who currently enjoy views will have better views, which increases the property values, which then increases the revenue for our village as well. It'll reduce the fire hazard. It will bring color and light and different wildlife to our community that we currently enjoy as well. Also needs to be noted that the jurisdictions such as Vancouver, West Vancouver, Burnaby have added the fee for the tree cutting on private properties because they simply lack trees. You know, those areas have been highly developed and there's mostly concrete. Whereas Anmore has added that fee because they don't have an OCP that is supposed to be protecting views. We do. In conclusion, all tree committee members have expressed concern on how the hard work that we have put into this has been manipulated and altered. It should be standard practice for village staff to accept and proceed with all recommendations as submitted by any committee. As committee members, we are fully invested in the process. If an alteration of any recommendation is required, staff should provide clear rationale as to the why, and also execute the intent of said recommendation to its fullest. By proceeding with a new tree committee bylaw as been represented, our village has an opportunity to be a leader and show how jurisdictions can creatively solve problems while maintaining our identity. I cannot understand, I really can't, why you would squander that opportunity by trying to copycat something from somebody else or from another jurisdiction. That's all I have to say for now. Thank you.
Sandra, in Stuart and staff's defense, what we see in front of us is the map for discussion rather than an intent by staff or anybody to try to push something through with an automatic stamp of approval from council. So you'll probably hear a fair amount of conversation, and I just want you to have the confidence that there wasn't any ill intent. I can speak on behalf of staff. It was a big report, and I'm confident that they did their best, and we now get a chance to take your comments into consideration, and everybody else is in advance of providing guidance back to staff if any changes are to be recommended.
Your Worship, may I speak to some of the points
Sure,
that were brought up? Thank you. I just you brought up a lot of points, and also I can sense your passion in this, and I also want to echo that. My intent is to try to implement to the best of our abilities as many of the aspects of your report as we possibly can, and that's kind of the reason why first of all I kind of stripped it down a little bit, the bylaw itself, because Richard actually said something fantastic tonight, which kind of I thought, well, that applies to the hedge issue that was reported on. He said regulations do not adopt anything you don't have the ability to enforce. I thought that was fantastic, because there's some things that become very difficult if you try to implement all of those recommendations into the bylaw. So I had to really quite strip it down to its basic parts. And as far as, and once again, you will see more of the, what reflects from your report from the policies. I'm trying to put the laws in the bylaw, the policies, the administrative policies in one, report or one, piece of legislation, and then the procedures all separate, not all of them together, and talking about a bylaw, me taking pieces of a bylaw from everybody else and not being a leader or independent. I'm actually trying to create something that people will look at ours in the future, quite frankly. Of course we look up, I refer to every site. I referred to Maple Ridge, to Mission, to Port Coquitlam, to Vancouver. I checked out everybody's bylaw, but at the same time, and I see a lot of issues that people that creating the bylaws tend to do, which puts, all the policy, all the procedures into the bylaw itself. I'm actually trying to get this little piece of legislation passed and then work on the policy that'll be more reflective, and I'm sure there'll still be people that will have concerns, but I'll have this passed. And then the next step will be the policies, and I'll work hard to try to get that accepted by council. And from there, we're home free and we do the procedures. Otherwise, when you have so much information that you're trying to bring forward, if you don't, kind of separate things out a little bit, you end up going around in circles, which sometimes happens, when you have so many different opinions. And, did I say one thing that with respect to BC Hydro and BC Gas, actually, they have their own provincial legislation, so it's ultra-virus. Meaning everything that they do is above the power of the municipality. In actual fact, their legislation overpowers our legislation. They can cut and do whatever they want with the trees to protect their lines, but they do work with the municipality to try to make everybody happy. So that's the reason why that wording was in place the way it was.
Okay, thanks, Stuart. Let's start getting a little bit of feedback as we go through. The first resident is Ben Shulistani.
Thank you, Mayor Belenki. Yes, I wanted to talk. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you.
Thank you. It sounds like the village is following double standard. And what I mean by double standard is that I don't know if Stuart has had a chance to look at what Councillor Rob Beck has done to the trees on the public property at the end of Marine Avenue near Watson Road, the new trail. There were basically he has either he himself or he had influence over for someone to clear cut in wholesale, like clear cut the entire trees at the end of Marine Avenue, and he had no views. Now he suddenly.
Ben, if you can comment on the bylaw that we're discussing now, and if you have advice on how to modify the bylaw, but we're not looking backward, and we're not looking at, and we're not going to be attacking anybody based on any of the opinions that you've got. Go ahead.
I am not attacking anybody, Mayor Belenki. What I'm trying to say is that everybody should be treated equal. Nobody should be above another person. Nobody is above the law. If you are going to come up with a new bylaw on trees, we should be respectful in considering what other people, I'm giving example of a councillor.
Ben, we're not going to look backwards. We're looking forward at a bylaw that will be applied fairly to everybody. So we're trying to set a new bylaw that will be applied fairly. So do you have anything to comment on the current bylaw?
I do.
Why don't you start with looking forward then? Go ahead.
I want to have an equal right, similar to Councillor Rob Beck, to be able to cut the bushes in front of our property. In fact, everybody on Marine Avenue should have equal right, the same as.
Ben, this is strike one, okay? This is a policy that will be applied fairly to everybody. You will have the same rights as everybody else based on the policy that we're discussing now.
Thank you. So I just want to make sure, are you saying that the same policy that was used for Councillor Rob Begg will be applied to other residents on Marine Avenue?
You appear to be under the misunderstanding. We are debating now a new policy that will replace the old policy and will be applied fairly to all. So this is a new policy we're debating right now, Ben. If you've got some feedback on the new policy, please offer it. I'm going to move on.
So would you please provide the basis for the clear cutting of the trees on the municipal property?
Strike 2, Ben, and I will eject you after the third strike. If you have a comment on going forward with the policy we're debating, please state it now, or I'm going to move on.
It appears that you do not want to listen to my comments, so I'm not going to make any more comments.
Thanks. Don Babineau, you're up.
Hi there. I first want to say that I agree with, I agree and sympathize with what Sandra shared with us. And I agree with wholeheartedly with what Carolina and Bruce have added to this conversation. This whole conversation, though, seems like a colossal waste of time in that we struck a tree committee, as I understand it, and there's obviously some significant disagreement between what is being put forward by Stuart and what the tree committee put forward. Shouldn't, as opposed to subjecting us all to this, why would there not be more agreement before this came to council? It's almost embarrassing.
The process, Don, is pretty consistent, where staff makes a recommendation for council to review, provide feedback, or approve as a policy-based decision. So despite the fact that there may be a significant delta in this regard, it's the same process as usual, which is that we debate in public as opposed to have private conversations behind the scene to ensure that we're all aligned and push something through. What you're seeing is a larger delta than there normally would be, but it's the transparency and public discussion that we want to ensure everybody can see happens in real time. No railroading.
Oh, okay, well, my opinion then, I share the opinion that was voiced already by Carolina and by Bruce, in that private properties should be left out of it. And if everybody's so concerned about the riparian zones, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. We haven't had this bylaw up until this point in time. Can anybody point to examples where people have caused problems with these riparian areas in their own properties? It seems that my guess is we're worried about nothing because we've got a history, unless we have a history of these riparian zones being damaged and anyhow. So my opinion is leave private properties out of it.
Okay, thanks. Guys, I know we've got Bruce and Carolina in the queue, but because there's nothing specific for council to respond to, we have one last resident. Let's ask Deborah to go ahead, please. Deborah. Deborah Struck? Deborah, if you are talking, we can't tell. I'm sorry, you're muted. You're not muted, but we can't hear you. So your phone or whatever you're on is not, the mic is not working. I'm assuming she is moving over to Peter's computer.
Yes, this is Peter. She should be here any second.
Okay.
Just get my camera on here for her. She couldn't get it to work on her phone, and I would like to I would like to speak after Deborah as well.
In here.
It's dark, yes.
Whoa, it's really dark in here. Okay, so as part of the tree committee, and I didn't get to hear everything that Carolina said or Bruce, and I agree with what Sandra was saying. We worked very, very hard on it. One of the zones that we definitely said we would not do is touch the trees on people's private property, just because that's the way it has been, and yeah, that we didn't want to do that. I I understand in terms of trying to make some money with people cutting trees, but the reality is as Sandra said, and it's quite visible around here, we have plenty and plenty of trees. And if we're going to penalize people, especially, you know, if people have quite a few of the cinder trees on their property, which are the coniferous trees, you would think if anything, you would want to encourage them taking them down rather than having them pay. What you may want to do instead with this is to, if somebody has a large property and they're going to call in a timber company and make a lot of money on those trees, well, okay, then in that case, yes, you can charge them some money for that if they're making money from getting their trees down. But if it's a matter of safety or views, it is really disappointing because we did put a lot of work into this and it is not the flavor of what we had. And to what Dawn was saying and the letter I just wrote into staff and council was, this council has done very well in engaging community and making people feel they're a part of community again, and that we can have a voice. Neil, you guys have all worked to having this, and the Zooms are great. People can talk, and with having committees and being able to give suggestions and ideas and come up with reports for different things. But if this happens with the hard work of committees and it's ignored, it'll go back to people just going, why bother? So
I hear you, Deborah, and I will say I cannot imagine that there was any consideration of this as a money generating, as revenue generating mechanism. That is the furthest thing I think from anything we do in permitting. Our permitting is always break even at best, so the village doesn't have to pay to provide a special service. So this was not about making money. So I can remove that from the concerns. This is just a delta, I think, in what the recommendation was versus what the bylaw proposals come out as. But it is not about making money.
So then why do we need permits for trees on private property?
We're about to have that debate when we finish up the last of the residents' feedback, and I think Peter's the only one left before that starts.
Okay, thank you, everyone.
No problem. Go ahead, Peter.
Well, I just want to say that we, sorry, I got a cut on my lip. That we've been, I've been here for 34 years, and myself and most of the residents have valued our freedom to deal with our trees the way that we would like to deal with them, without having authority over it. Stuart has not been here long enough to understand how we think here. So there's unintended consequences that can come along with these rules as well. I have friends who live in Burnaby. Burnaby has a tree bylaw. So my friend and his neighbors, every single tree, once the bylaw, they come in, they cut down all their small trees. They won't let them grow anymore. And when they apply to cut down a big tree, which is causing phenomenal trouble, dropping crap all over their roof, all over their lawn, pitch all over the cars on the street, they go in to get the permit, and a permit is not, they can't get a permit, even after getting an arborist. So one of the fears of having permitted things is that we go in to cut a tree that we'd like cut down for our own personal reasons, and we're told no. And that is not the way our community has been. It's worked fine the way it is right now for 100 years. So we would like it to continue. Sorry about my bleeding lip. I got a little cut on it.
Understood.
So I'm hoping that the council will honor the committee, and they spent so much hard work dealing with that particular matter, and I'll leave it with them and the council to do the right thing. Thank you.
Okay. So what I'm going to ask is, we've got Carolina, Bruce, and Rob up. Can you keep your comments to a minimum in things that have already been said, and please offer your position, what your thought is, so that I can propose, if we're going to have a change, I can take the consensus from what you guys are saying, or what appears to be leading statements from what you're saying, to offer any modifications for us to get to a vote. So Carolina, you're first.
Thank you. So I just want to make it clear, my understanding here, according to what Stuart has said, is that this is just one part of the recommendation. So this is the bylaw, and we're also perhaps looking into do a policy. Is that correct, Stuart? And the policy would involve more of what the committee recommendation was. Is that correct?
That is correct. The bylaw is just the basic laws, and the policies are intended. That's where you would see more of the tree committee's work in that, because it would have the recommended tree replacements. It'd have a lot of that kind of literature in it. And once again, how the control over the trees on private property would be dictated by council. So in other words, there would be an incredibly simple process, and it would just be there because of the couple issues that I've already cited.
Okay, thank you. So what I would suggest, if council agrees with me, if council's okay with that, but what I would suggest is to defer that to September, to our first meeting in September. I personally would like to see a bylaw that does not involve any regulations on trees, on permits, on cutting trees on private property. That's not something I believe in. I remember I heard from the fire chief the other day in one of our meetings that he would love it, even though he loves trees, he would love if the community had no trees because it would make it more safe when it came to fires. So I think that sort of defeats the purpose. I understand what you're saying, but that defeats the purpose. So I would ask council if that's okay for staff to take all of the comments from the tree committee that is present right now and come back with a bylaw that reflects better what the intentions, what the true intentions of the committee was. And I would highly suggest you not put anything more on private property, because been doing this for a long time without needing permits for private property. And I haven't seen any problems, including on riparian zones myself. So yeah, so that's what I have to say for now. So defer it to September, take all the comments in, take the private property thing, trees out of the picture, and address, as you said, more of the recommendations into the policy when the policy is ready. That being said, I would like to thank very much, because I understand it was a huge amount of work, and I understand it was a huge recommendation from the committee, and there was a lot that was looked into. So I do really appreciate the amount of work that was put into this by the committee and also by staff so far. So thank you.
Okay, thanks, Bruce.
Thanks, Neil. First, I just want to reiterate the point you made, which is simply this is a perfectly normal process in terms of trying to move towards a bylaw we haven't had before. There's going to be debate. There's obviously people have strong views on both sides. Basically, I support everything that Peter has said, particularly I think he summarizes nicely the view that people have had here, and it is a distinct location. So I'm happy to wait some further time for this. I appreciate the work that's been done, but I don't want to see anything that proposes to regulate trees on private land at this stage. We may get there, but now is not the time.
Thanks, Bruce. Rob.
I think Mary had something to say first, Neil, but she just didn't. She couldn't find her hand on the computer upstairs. You want to wait for her after me, or would you like her to go?
Can you go first, Rob? I'd like to get the last of the feedback from council.
First of all, directed to Stuart regarding the riparian areas. They are governed by SPEA. That's the Stream Preservation Act. And if you look in there, the rules are very, very clear. And riparian areas are whether they flow through private property or village property. Basically, the rules are the rules. So if you look at the SPEA rules, they can be governed very easily by that. There's no problem if they go through private property. That just as an aside at this point in time. I think that my problem with this bylaw is I think what we should do is maybe look at something different. I think what we should do is we should do the policies first. Those policies are not enforceable. They're what we aspire to attain. If we started with those, rolled in the procedures, it would be very simple to write a bylaw for this tree. because by the time we got to that point, it would be very, very clear what the essence, if you will, of the tree committee is. So I also have a problem, Neil, with your statement, because this was going to be read first, second, and third reading tonight. I would say we scrap this and we change tact. And what we do is we do the policy first, the procedures, then we write the bylaw and we write it once. Very simple.
Thanks. Lisa?
Thank you. Rob took the words out of my mouth. I've written that down as well. That first thing that came up to me and I highlighted was third reading. Residents having to pay for a permit to take trees off of their own property. I don't think that's the flavor. I really appreciate Sandra Chapman's comments. The tree committee did work very, very hard, and I respect them highly. I also respect you too, Stuart, and this was a lot of work that you put through, but I think this should be deferred. If it's possible to do the policies and procedures first before the bylaw. I totally agree with Mr. Bay.
Yeah, thanks. So I'm going to make a rare, governance move in that I think we're consistent across all of council and we don't need to debate more. And residents are probably going to approve of what we're going to do. I'm going to propose we defer this. We refer it back to staff. I think we're unanimous that we don't want this to touch private property, and we'd like fewer regulations rather than more red tape for whatever comes back from staff. And if people are comfortable with that referral back to staff, then I think we can just move on to the next point of the agenda. And if people want to bring back something in other business later, so that's great. But I think we have consensus from council that this is not a fit, and why it's not a fit. I think we can move on. Okay.
Could we have someone move that, Your Worship?
That's what I'm going to ask. Was someone willing to move it? Okay, I've got moved. Lisa, Bruce, I think I see you seconding. Okay. So again, we don't need to be here all night when everybody appears to be in perfect agreement. So can I get all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, none opposed, motion carried. Stuart, this was a ton of work. This does not reflect poorly on you for your first time going through this. It's just been a tough go of it. And so I appreciate all the work you're putting in, and we'll look forward to seeing in September something that you can use some of this feedback to help support.
Thank you, Your Worship.
All right, reports from mayor and council committee representatives. So a quick group of updates, and there's not too much going on. On the water system and firefighting capacity review, obviously that presentation wasn't tonight. The water committee does have a Zoom meeting scheduled for July 22nd. I encourage anybody who would like to be involved in or watch and provide some feedback. That's the time to be able to do it. So that's July 22nd. The bylaw.
I mentioned time, Neil. It's I believe 3 to 4 o'clock.
I don't have that. That's a good question.
It's from 3 to 5, Your Worship.
3 to 5. Okay.
Okay. And the information, Lorna, available on our website?
Yes, it is, Your Worship.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. An update, just because it's obviously top of mind, especially we have an article, even just I think in the Vancouver Sun tonight, based on the parking situation in our village. The bylaw enforcement and parking update. Ticket revenue from January 1 to present is almost $25,000. The number of parking tickets issued from June 1st is 124. We've had 43 tickets in the past weekend, and that revenue is not included in the above $25,000 revenue total. And Coquitlam Towing has towed 30 vehicles in July alone. And a couple of the key points, Coquitlam Towing is our only towing service provider that we have available to us at this point. And so we're doing our best to try to find other solutions. We're even considering hiring additional bylaw support, and we've rejigged our bylaw officers' hours to allow for more time to protect the roadways rather than the ward. So we hear the concerns loud and clear, and we're actively trying to come up with solutions, but hopefully that gives people some perspective on what work has resulted in thus far. I don't have anything else on my reports. Committee representatives, there's no report set up here as well. So we have on item 8, 3 items of correspondence. Can I get someone to move receipt of these items?
Moved.
I think that was Bruce, and seconded by Rob. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
None opposed, motion carried. And then the information items, is there anything arising out of the information items council would like to discuss? We kind of covered that, but I got to ask it again. All right.
Neil, I have one question.
Sure.
Can you tell me why the decision was made that our bylaw officer who writes the tickets, who it's very obvious has become a profit center for the village, we would not, and she's willing to work on Sundays or an extra day, and we would not have her work the busiest day of the weekend.
So you're making so many leaps there, Rob. So
I guess my point
it's like you went in the Matrix and came out after a bunch of leaps.
My point is there's so many opportunities and people parking all over the place, and I realize we only have one bylaw officer.
It has nothing to do with the days. Lorna, would you like to pass the message on? Do you want me to go? You want to go ahead?
You go ahead, Your Worship.
Somebody fill me
Our
in.
bylaw officer is ill, and it almost never, ever happens. And so we even pulled in additional support in the meantime, and we've got a program that we're starting with Coquitlam Towing to be able to help on the ticketing side. We've been working heavily with the RCMP to add to the ticketing capacity, but it was not because it was Sunday, Rob. It was because she was ill.
Okay, the issue wasn't an ill thing. It was strictly an overtime issue, and I couldn't understand it. This is not necessarily this Sunday. That happened to be something that happened, and I hope she's doing all right. I didn't know that she was sick.
It's not an overtime issue.
It would appear to me that, I mean, if the girl is willing to work the hours and it's a profit center for us, we would keep her out there for a couple extra hours, because she's just doing a bang up job. I mean, she just is doing a great job.
I'm glad.
Yeah, and we have approved extra hours for her, and we're now working on changing her hours for the summer. So she would be here later in the day, but her days off are Tuesday and Wednesday.
Tuesday and Wednesday.
She works every weekend normally. Mhm.
It's going to get busy on Tuesdays and
Oh, it
Wednesdays.
is, I know.
We're looking to add people, and there's all sorts of different strategies that we're working on to try to ensure that she's even not alone as well, because we can't manage the entire village on a busy day.
No, you just have to look at what's going on at the lake, and kudos to staff for managing what we've got going so far here, and kudos to the residents that are putting out turnaround here. There's no public parking on sandwich boards.
Yeah, we're in agreement, except after you got out of the Matrix, what you're proposing is what we're working on, and we're in agreement.
Okay.
All right, Carolina, you've got a comment?
Yes, thank you. I would just like to support Rob's comments. If she wants to work more, let her do it. And for you saying that we're looking into hiring someone new, would that be like a part-time position? Would that be a consultant that you just hire for the day and then you can hire different people? What is the thought on that, please?
Well,
It's a temporary, sorry, Neil.
That's okay. It's certainly not a permanent staff member. That would be absolutely insane, and we wouldn't do it in any circumstance whatsoever. It's a part-time contract that would be manageable on the hot days.
Okay, so just part-time contract. Thank you.
No problem. David, did you change your name, David? Shulistani, I'm assuming?
That's correct. I was just going to offer myself. I would like to apply if the position opens up to be a bylaw enforcement officer for the parking.
All right, thank you for that. I'm typing the rest of your name in for you. All right.
And where would you guys be posting that application for that position, or if that is the process? Thank you.
Well, it's of course it requires a certification that you would want to ensure that you have if you'd like to look at applying for it.
For sure. And where can I find that information for that course?
Justice Institute of BC.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Bruce, you've got a check mark beside your name. I haven't seen that before.
Oh, I was agreeing with something you said 5 minutes ago, so don't worry about it.
That's why I haven't seen it before. We don't always agree.
Yeah, save that one.
All right, so we're into new business. Council members have any new business they want to bring up?
No.
All right, public question period. Why don't we go to public question period? Oh, Carolina, looks like your public question. Go ahead, Carolina. You muted yourself.
It was just under the new business. I'm not putting a motion forward or anything today, but I would like to ask, I really enjoy seeing your updates, Neil, on the agenda, so we clarify to people, so thank you for that. I was wondering if we could get something similar for you from the committees that you're sitting on Metro Vancouver as well as TransLink. If we could get an update of the meetings that you had, like a bullet, like it doesn't need to be detailed, but like something like bullet points on what's going on in the region, on how things are going, like things like Roach Fair Cove and all that stuff. It would be good, I guess it would be really useful to council to know what's going on in the region with the committees that the mayor participates on.
So we'd have to hire another permanent staff person to be my admin to take all the notes. So I'm happy to answer questions anytime, but I don't have the time to write reports. I have, on average, I'm going to say 2 committee meetings a week on average, and in some cases I have 3 and 4 in a week, and so I don't have the time to write reports on it. As I said, I'll answer questions, but no, unfortunately, that is not an option.
Yeah, it's not, I'm not asking you to write reports. It's just give us a briefing of what's going on in the region, or else we're not going to know. And, you know, and that is something that is common in other municipalities. I've seen more mayors doing this, and it was exactly like I said, bullet points, just a summary of what happened in the region. Because right now we're kind of left in the dark if we don't read the agendas. For instance, I'll give you an example. I didn't even know we lost the MRN because there was some confusion on your part there, up until 2 meetings ago. So we didn't, so that's the kind of stuff that I'm looking for. It's more clarification on what's going on parks specifically, because we're having so many problems of overflowing people over here. So maybe you have some instances, some clarification for us on that. If there's anything.
Why don't you send me some of those summaries from individual meetings, and I can take a look and see how they're done.
I'm sorry?
Why don't you send me the summaries from individual meetings that you alluded to, like with the MWOR?
It's just in their agenda. And that is something that, because you're sitting on a committee representing a municipality, I do think that council, that we should have some sort of summary from them, even if it's once a month instead of every meeting. I'm not asking you to do this every meeting.
They're public meetings too, so you can watch them online.
I do, but not all.
And you still want a summary?
I read the agendas. I watched a bunch of them online. I'm usually impaired, but it would be better if the updates came from the mayor, because obviously you know better than I would just by reading the agenda. I don't see that as being too much to ask. I'm just asking for a very brief summary on the most, on the things that are most important, perhaps. But if you're not,
if you can send me the examples, I'll take a look and see if they're manageable.
I can send you examples for sure. I can send you some videos from other municipalities.
Thanks. Jim Chisholm.
Can you hear me now?
Gotcha.
It's Sherry, and I'm absolutely in support of Councillor Clark, particularly about the park. Anything that is really going to affect our municipality, like this interpretation center, I'd like to be very much updated on. I don't need a lengthy report, but I will need a heads up, because I certainly will be terribly affected wherever it goes, the day, night, where it's located, all that sort of thing. And the other thing I'd like to speak to you about is all your volunteer committees. I mean, you've got water, trees, revenue generating. I think that you have to remember these are people who live in the community, want the best for the community, and sincerely give their time and best efforts. And a lot of effort goes in. And I think that if any of the public works people or staff or even council have something they feel should be addressed, I don't think it should be through a report at a council meeting. I really believe they should go to the committee and talk to them, and maybe the committee will take up their ideas. I think it's a bit of a slap to the committee when they're overruled by staff. I really think you have to give a little more respect to these people in the community, giving their time.
Noted. Okay, thanks. John Shulistani.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Thank you. I believe I just got a note of two conflicts of interest of the council members. One of them is Mr. Rob Begg, who had perhaps an insider information of that we are going to have a tree committee, so he could get all of the trees cut prior to the to this report and prior to any new bylaw for the tree committee. So I don't believe I believe that Mr. Rob Begg has a conflict of interest. And also another conflict of interest is with respect to dog. I believe Ms. Wilder has a dog, and those who have a dog, maybe they are not happy that others also could get a dog. So I believe that creates a conflict of interest. And also any new bylaw is going to be, probably they are going to get a vote in something that is in their favor and perhaps to those who don't like to get a dog. Thank you.
Don Babineau.
Hi there. I don't know if I missed this, but I in the last council meeting, it was stated that there was going to be a comment made or a report provided on the encroachments on road ends. And I don't know if I heard that in this meeting.
There has not been anything proposed on encroachments to road ends. Are you thinking like audit wise?
No, just where there's driveways on existing road ends, and what the, you know, how do we move forward on some of those road ends where we've got driveways on a road end? And Lorna said that she would report on that at this meeting.
Well, the road end report covered the encroachments on the 7 road ends, but it's not done. It's not done as an audit throughout the entire village, and so Lorna, I think I can speak on behalf that there hasn't been the time for staff with the things that you see have been presented already and they're working on to begin another project like an audit of all encroachments on all road end or on all properties in the village. Lorna, do you have anything you want to add?
You're right, Your Worship. What I was referring to is the report on road ends that does talk about the encroachments on road ends, but not for the entire village. That would basically be an audit of almost the entire village, Your Worship. Yeah.
All right, so of the 7 then, are there any encroachments on the 7 that are problematic for the sale of the road ends at this time?
The report does, Richard's not on the phone, but the report deals with it, and they have, they provided feedback on how to manage the encroachments, and they focus on driveways being maintained, I believe, and all other types of encroachments potentially being dealt with in advance of a potential sale.
Question, Neil. So now we're on the road ends. It also mentioned in the report, Richard's report, that the road ends with driveways, all driveways would be given an easement. Certainly that hasn't been approved.
No, that's what I was just saying to Don. That was a recommendation, but no, it has not been approved.
Yeah. Thank you for clarity. One other thing while we're talking about this, I would suggest that.
Hang on, I think it's Don's turn.
Oh, sorry.
Patience, my friend. Don, anything else?
No, I don't fully understand the answer, but no, I don't have anything else.
All right. So last resident on the list is David Shulistani.
Yeah, I have a quick question. Was in regards to, I understand that, for example, on Marine Avenue and whatnot, we have stated that parking be limited to permit holders, be it residents or whatnot. What is the policy in regards to boat trailers, regards to campers? Because I understand that that space is being taken up by these trailers that are not operating on their own, yet that parking space is being taken up.
Lorna?
I'm sorry, Your Worship, I'm not aware of any trailers on Marine Avenue. Like boat trailers are not allowed if they're not attached to a vehicle. There are all sorts of regulations, but I'm not aware of any on Marine Avenue specifically.
Yeah, there's currently one right in front of Mr. Drew's place. So that's why I was asking, because that space is being taken up by a trailer, yet there's other vehicles being parked in front of our property.
If it has a village yes parking pass on it, or Deckel, then
It has nothing on it.
I'll have it looked into tomorrow, Your Worship.
Thank you. All right, the lineup's gone a little bit longer. Rob, you're up next.
Okay, just a word to the Shulastanis who have got their information wrong once again. I would counsel them to look at the existing bylaw on tree trimming on the foreshore, and they would have the same opportunity as I had at the time that our tree trimming was done under the guidance of an arborist. And I believe until the new tree bylaw is enacted, that we're still under the old bylaw, and they have every opportunity to trim in a responsible way on the foreshore, and they can apply for that. And I would suggest that they get their facts straight as once again before they make these outrageous statements. Thank you.
Ben Shulastani, you're up next.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay, Mayor Berenke?
Yes, I can.
Thank you.
I want you to stay on point, please.
Thank you. Well, actually, everything I said was based on fact. In fact, a couple of days ago, I saw Councillor Beck, and he saw me. He was actually cutting bushes on the public property. I don't know if he applied for permit to cut the bushes and maintain.
Ben, can we talk about village business, please?
Sure. This was just a response. I think I have a right to respond when somebody makes a comment about me. Now, I think, now in general terms, I think any bylaw, any policy, anything that is going to be passed, if a councillor previously used insider information of such a bylaw or policy coming into effect and basically did something that is against that bylaw, I think that is a clear indication that that councillor has a conflict of interest, if not also abuse of power prior to coming up with a new bylaw. So, for example, this is not the first example.
We don't need examples. Your point's taken, Ben, and you've given examples already. Is there anything else you'd like to use your time for, or should we move on?
I just wanted to say that this is similar to the dock that is built in front of our property by the former Mayor Drew. I mean, he also
Your
built
Worship,
a
we should not be having this discussion.
And you are member of the 3-strike rule. Ben, if you're enjoying this meeting, I encourage you not to talk about anything under litigation. Lisa, why don't you go ahead?
Oh, thank you. I just want to reply to the chair, to Don Babineau. If you look at the council report, today's date, interim report number 2, on page 6 of 7, it clearly talks about the potential encroachments and how they would be disposed of or easements created, and that would all be, so it's really clear there. I just wanted to point it out to you so you can go back and read it. That was it.
Thank you. Carolina.
Just follow up on Lisa's comment to Don. I think Don's comment was more on all of the road ends, not just the 7.
Okay.
His comment was on the encroachment and if there's anything that council's thinking about. And correct me if I'm wrong, Don, but that's what I understood. Thank you.
Don, you're muted.
That's what I originally understood.
All right. I don't see any other hands up. I know it's after 10 for the first time in a long time, but we did know this was coming. Oh, Carolina, again, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to make a quick comment. I really hope, Neil, that you would consider to update us on what's happening in the region. And if you like,
really, we've already talked about this.
Just let me finish, please. And yeah, so I really think you should reconsider. And I also don't have a lot of time in my hands, but I will go look and search for the agendas because you asked me to. And and in the end, we're a team, right? So I think it's very important for you to take feedback, not just from the residents, but also from council. Thank you.
Like we already talked about, send me the reports like you said that you'd like, and after each different meeting, so I can see the formats, and I'll look at that in consideration.
Thank you.
No other comments? All right, let's move to adjourn.
I move to adjourn, please.
Moved by Lisa.
Second.
No one. Oh, Carolina seconded. All in favor?
Aye. Good night, everybody.
None opposed. Motion carried. All right, thanks, everybody.
Good meeting. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, staff.
Good night, and thank you too.
Okay, goodbye.
Good night.
Good night.
You just end?